Make sure.
Okay, good morning. I'd like to call the May 30th, 2023 regular meeting to order. I would like to point out that this meeting will have Zoom teleconference for public participation. City Clerk, may we have a roll call, please?
Committee member Vice Chair Chenault.
Here.
Committee member Clark.
Here.
Committee member Kairos is not present. Committee member Schaefer.
Here.
Committee member Silva is not present. Committee member Gaines.
Here.
Gaines, excuse me. Okay. Let the record reflect that Kairos and Silva are absent.
Okay, Committee Member Clark, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Please stand.
Okay, right over here.
It's
Ready, pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we will move to item 4, nominations of the chair and vice chair. Okay, board members, do we have any nominations for the chairperson?
I think the chair is sitting in the right spot right now. I nominate Tammy.
I second.
I second.
Okay, do we have a motion to elect Tammy Chenault as chair of the Measure Review Committee?
We need to.
Sorry.
Now we're doing. Yeah. Okay, so. We'd like to take public comment
Oh,
prior
okay,
to the.
all right. Oh, okay. All right.
So if we could move into public comment.
Okay, we're going to move into public comment. Then we'll resume the nominations.
So if there's any public comment on the actual item, now's the time. On the. Checker. Yeah, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Pat Gregory. I voted for Measure U because it was supposed to enhance public safety. Instead, I believe the city has misused Measure U in spite of this oversight committee. The 2021-22 audit that you are tasked to review has less police officers than we had in 2017. And apparently the city just cut paramedics in Station 1. Yet both resolutions that you were just given copies of state, and this has been with 2 different councils, that the number of police officers and paramedics were to be increased. Shouldn't this committee have questions? Please don't use the excuse of how hard it is to recruit personnel, because that's really understandable. But if that was really the case, there should be a lot more unspent money in the Measure U balance awaiting the hire of those new recruits. The 21-22 audit that you are to review shows Measure U funds in support of general public safety is 0. Yet the alleged audit that you are to review shows that there's $6 million in wages paid by Measure U. Why is Measure U paying for police wages if there aren't additional police officers? Shouldn't that be a general fund expense? Shouldn't this committee have questions? The 2022-23 budget, why is Measure U paying for sitting there? The 2023 budget also shows 90 police officers. How is that in any way realistic? Because Measure U money has been spent every single year for the past 6 years without additional officers. The budget is totally unrealistic, and I think it misrepresents what's going to happen. I think it's done as a PR stunt. Please, this committee, ask what has happened to the audits that never took place from 2017 to 2022. This is on you, the committee. Please don't do what the last 2 oversight committees have done and simply just rubber stamp these budgets. Our fire and our police need what was promised to them from the resolutions that you hold in your hands. Please help us make sure that the city honors those resolutions. Thank you.
there any other public comment? I'd like to call out on the Zoom call if there's any other public comment. Now is the time to raise your hand. And I do have one public speaker, Ann Smith. You are live with the board.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're live with the board.
Okay, I actually echo what Pat said, and I am infuriated about the city net going into the Measure U budget. I don't understand why you're doing that. And again, I hope that this particular, I'm just going to echo what Pat said. I hope that this particular oversight committee does not rubber stamp what's going on, because I'll tell you, most people are at work right now, so they're not listening to this, but I am. And I'm going to make sure everybody that I know understands what this committee is supposed to do. And I am going to do something about it publicly. So that's all I have to say. That's not a threat. It's simply that I want you to do what you were appointed to do. Thank you. That's all I have. I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Smith. If there's anyone else on the call, seeing all the attendees, I think that sums us up for public comment. There's no further public comments.
Okay. All right, so will you resume the nominations? Okay, so we have a nomination. Do we have a motion to elect Tammy Chenault as Chair of the Measure U Committee?
So make a motion.
I second.
Second, City Clerk, roll call.
Thank you. Committee member Kane.
What do I say, just yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Committee member Chenault.
Yes.
Committee member Clark.
Yes.
Committee member Schaefer.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes.
Okay. Board members, do we have any nominations for the Vice Chair?
I nominate myself, George Schaefer.
I'll second. All right, we have anyone? Okay, do we have a motion to elect George Schaefer as Vice Chair of the Measure U Committee? We got our second. Okay, City Clerk, roll call.
Okay. A motion by Schaefer, second by Kane.
Mhm.
Committee member Kane. Committee member Chenault.
Yes.
Committee member Clark. Committee member Schaefer.
Yes.
That motion passes to appoint Schaefer as vice chair.
Okay.
Can I ask a question or maybe a procedure through the city manager? In my time, I think this is what my third session of Measure U. Every time a letter to the council was signed by our chairman or vice chairman, none of the rest of us got copies. Will you, if it's okay, will you at least have staff email each of us a copy of it? I went through my files the other day and I don't have a single copy of any of the letters that went.
These are letters from committee members to the full council,
Yes,
Yes.
at the end of our meetings.
so we can work with the city clerk to make sure that happens.
I've
Thank you.
signed a few and I've never received a copy as
Okay.
well. What I
We
signed.
can make that happen.
Okay, I'll get you copies of prior letters as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we've gone through our communications from the public. Let's see. Go to consent calendar or,
Chair, I wanted to just briefly interrupt
Yeah.
because there's several new faces in the room.
okay,
We could have just an opportunity to have a brief introduction,
okay,
especially with the
Right.
manager switch. And then we have some new committee members, if everyone would like to introduce themselves for, the public and the general audience here.
okay, I'll go first.
Hi, I'm Kayla Kane. I've lived in Hemet for almost 3 years, 2.5 years. I work for Valverde Unified School District out in Paris. You work there too?
Yes.
Okay, I swear I recognized you, but I was
Okay.
like, I was not 100% sure. I'm the buyer for the food services department.
Okay,
So that's what I do for work. That's kind of it.
My name's Dick Clark, retired law enforcement with a lot of fire background also. Been here in the valley almost 8 years. And this is my third go around with
okay,
Measure U.
All right, Tammy Chenault, I'm a school teacher in the Val Verde Unified School District, just completed my 26th year in the district, and this will be my second go around with the Measure U committee.
I'm George Schaefer. I've been in town almost 3 years. Semi-retired, accounting software specialist. I'm on the board of the pantry and volunteering and donating to various charities in town.
Why don't I start on this side? So we have a couple of new faces. I'm one of them around the table. I'm Mark Prestwich. I'm a relatively new city manager, been here about 3 months and look forward to working with this committee.
City Clerk John Paul, been here with the city for a little over 2 years.
I am Tiffany Barnett, the accounting manager here at the city of Hemet. I've lived in Hemet for my entire life, and I've been with the city for 15 years.
Paul Espinoza, interim finance director, retired annuitant, and I've been with the city of Hemet for about 6 months.
I'm Eddie Poost, your police chief. I've been with the city my whole career, so over 27 years. I became the police chief in 2019. And I'm proud to serve the city. Thank you.
Eddie Self, served as your fire chief, started my career in public safety actually in Riverside County. And then my travels took me to CAL FIRE in the city of Long Beach and then back here to serve as your fire chief. I've been here about 19 months now. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, should we move to the consent calendar now?
Yes.
Okay, all right. All consent calendar items will be acted upon by a single action of the city council unless otherwise requested by an individual committee member for separate consideration. Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, do we have a second?
A second.
City clerk, roll call.
I have a motion by committee member Clark, second by committee member Kane. Committee member Kane. Committee member, Chair Chenault.
Yes.
Committee member Clark,
Yes.
Vice Chair Schaefer.
Yes,
That motion passes.
Hello.
No worries.
Okay, next.
Are you, you're Delisha?
I am Delisa.
Please join us at the table.
Okay.
We'll let the record reflect that
Okay.
committee member Delisha is now president at 15.
Good morning.
Get this swear.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. If we could have just a brief intermission, I need to procedurally swear you in before we start with you.
Okay.
So if you'll just repeat after me. I, and then your name,
I, Delicia Silva,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservations
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Perfect. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right.
That sounds familiar.
He hasn't started. Get those at the end.
Okay. All right, the minutes.
Yes, we approved with the 5-0. We can move on to discussion item.
Okay. Okay, we'll now move to our discussion item. Staff, do you have a report for the committee?
Yes, and this is going to be a multi-person presentation. And I'll begin. We're going to walk through a few slides and then we'll turn it over to the police chief and the fire chief to kind of wrap it up. You're serving on
a committee that was created by a voter approved act. So the committee was a requirement of the ballot measure that was passed back in November of 2016. So some of you are new. The tax was a general tax, meaning it can be spent for any municipal purpose, any public purpose. However, shortly after placing the ballot measure on the ballot for November, the council adopted a resolution. We provided copies of that to you. It's 4703. There's one that stands alone, and then there was a second resolution adopted by the council after that vote was approved by the voters of Emmett, and that was resolution 4731. And so what that is guidance, it's policy direction from the city council on how resources from Measure U are to be invested by the city. So with that background, and we'll maybe need to come back to that a little bit later. And we're going to touch on a few of those related items. I'm going to point this direction.
Yep.
Yeah. Maybe it's not on.
That's the very later. I could give you this for the meantime, just in click.
Okay, so today as with a lot of cities, our budget is guided by a strategic plan. It's helpful for cities to have a strategic plan because it helps to keep the council focused on goals for the organization. And it presents an opportunity for us to measure the performance of those activities at the end of the year. At this point in the budget, we're in the process and we anticipate scheduling a meeting on Friday to walk through some action items for the next 12 months, as well as something we're calling a draft Safe and Clean Streets Initiative, which will also be on that agenda. This is a little bit of what I referenced at the beginning. Measure U created this body, and each year you're required to independently review and comment on the expenditure plan. That's the draft budget, as well as look at the audit documents that we receive each year from the city's auditor. So the council won't be taking action on the final budget until I believe the second meeting in June.
That's correct.
The legislation requires you to meet at least twice each calendar year and more frequently if necessary to discharge the responsibilities of the committee. I was staffed to the exact same committee at the city of Sacramento several years ago. So there was one distinction. They didn't weigh in on the recommended expenditures. So that's the distinction for this group versus a lot of others, including the one in Sacramento. So this is the verbatim. I don't know if you can move that out of the way so we can read it, but it's important to read through this because this is really the guidance that the council's presented to us. Has everyone had a chance to read this, word for word?
It was just given to us today.
Let's read it then. Let's read it. So the proceeds of the tax may be expended on any and all regular and special expenses incurred for the operation and provision of public safety services within the city and in response to mutual and automatic aid agreements, including but not limited to wages, benefits, and deferred compensation for police and fire personnel, and the pro rata share of such costs for other city personnel that support the police and fire services within the city. A good example of that would be the city clerk or finance staff that also help in processing payroll, et cetera, things like that. The purchase, operation, and maintenance of vehicles and equipment, including repairs, fuel, and maintenance, the operation, maintenance, repair, and retrofitting of existing property, buildings, improvements, and other facilities necessary for fire or police purposes, risk management and legal services in defense of claims and legal actions against the city and public safety personnel, training, licensing, and certification of police and fire personnel, and for utilizing contractors, subcontractors, consultants, and professional services directly related to enhancing police and fire services.
that each fiscal year, the tax proceeds shall be allocated 2/3 to the City of Hemet Police Department and 1/3 to the City of Hemet Fire Department. So when we look at next year's budget and we look at the actuals for this year, today we're talking about a neighborhood of about $16.8 million. So I think in early years was the number in the $7-8 million range when this first came
It was
on board.
projected initially $10 million, and then after the initial year, which was I'd say a mid-year, it came in at 11 million, and then the last 3 years, it really jumped up to around 16 million.
So we're grateful for Measure U because it provides today it represents about 25% of the city's overall revenue. Our economic engine is built around the sales tax. So almost 60% of our revenue that's derived is coming from sales tax. So that auto mall is really the economic engine. Gas sales, big box retail type of sales. That's where our money's coming from. And when cars are sold to out of city residents, anyone living in the county, and any one of our friends in Menifee that wants to come shop for a nice car, 1% of the purchase price is given back to the City of Hemet. So we really like it when others visit the Hemet Model Mall as well as our own residents.
So I'm sorry, so the 16 million is the overall budget we have thus far?
16 million is what we're projecting for revenue. It's the actual for this year.
Correct.
Okay.
And we're projecting 16.8 million for revenue next year. And what we do is we work with a sales tax advisor, a reputable firm that provides guidance on what we expect the sales tax to be. And I'll tell you that the sales tax advisor is building in a bit of an economic slowdown next year. So our revenue, the revenue estimate provided to the city for overall sales tax in January was about $1.3 million higher than what we're modeling today because they've pulled back on their forecast and they're essentially building in a slowdown, which in a city that has a higher dependence on sales tax, we have to be a little more careful than other cities that maybe have a lot of property tax relative to sales tax. Or if we had a more diverse revenue stream that included a healthier amount of hotel tax. Hotel tax is also very volatile in local governments. And frankly, our municipal services in California, because we don't tax services, we tax goods when we do a sales tax transaction. And the economy's moved from goods to services. So we have higher swings, higher peaks and valleys. So when the times are good, they're really good. But when they're bad or we slow down, we tend to feel it more than other cities because of the significant amount of sales tax in our budget. This is a slide that we built for the council this year. We had a budget workshop last week, and I think this is a nice way of kind of separating Measure U from the general fund revenues so that we all understand what it is. And think of this as the left side and the right side. So on the left side, if we didn't have Measure U, this is essentially what the world looked like before Measure U, but these are current numbers. So without Measure U, our general fund, we're projecting $52.6 million of revenue this next year. And under the resolution 4703 and 4731, what they do is when we passed Measure U, there was it was important to the city council that we preserve the existing investment in police and fire. And essentially that investment looked something like 72% to police and fire, 28% to the rest of the organization. So under the left side here, 72% of that 52 million is allocated to public safety, and 28% of the dollars are allocated to non-public safety. So what is non-public safety? That's city hall, finance, planning, city administration, city clerk, even the city council a little bit, and the library. Primarily. And then on the public safety, 72%, the resolutions call for us to break that down 2/3 to the police department, 25.2 million, and 1/3 to the fire department, 12.6 million. With Measure U on the right side here, in addition to the $52.6 million, the city receives $16.8 million that's directly attributable to the Measure U 1% sales tax. And what the resolution calls for is for us to allocate that 2/3 to police, 1/3 to fire. Today, that's $11.2 million to police and $5.6 million to fire. So we can add up the 25.2 on police and the 11.2 for police. And those two numbers together become the police budget, and similarly for the fire department. So when we look at the overall revenue, essentially we're allocating 79% of the total general fund revenues, and Measure U as a general fund revenue also, although we account for it separately so that we can monitor those costs. But 79% of the revenue is allocated to public safety in a 2/3, 1/3 format. And then the remainder, 14.7, is what is allocated to the non-public safety. Any questions on this slide?
Yes, so the public safety fund, or so the general funds that's going to the police, that's still in existence, and the Measure U is in addition to that?
Yes.
Got it, okay.
So you can see, I mean, today, $16.8 million, 16.8 started around 7 or 8 in 2017 is when it first started. Yes.
Is the balance of funds after sales tax mostly property tax?
In terms of other revenues,
Yeah.
to the city, a significant, about 1/3 of our budget is property tax today.
Okay. When is all these new housing tracts gonna give us more money?
Well, if I may, right now, that's part of the reason our property taxes are growing. In past years, our property taxes had been somewhat flat. Post-COVID, now that we're having much more development, our property taxes are starting to grow a bit more. We met with our property tax consultants. They're very familiar with the city. They've been a tax consultant for the city at least 10 years that I'm aware of. But given all the developments that are going on, our property values are growing. To be conservative, we're trying to hold that to a reasonable level. So right now, we are starting to see that growth.
Sometimes there's a little bit of a lag by the time they get entered into, once we provide a certificate of occupancy, someone can move into the house. Depending on the timing of the year, it doesn't always go to the assessor's office on time, and sometimes there's a little bit of a lag. Now, when the lag occurs, there's revenue from that date of close.
Correct. We receive property tax revenue in the city twice a year, typically in November, December, now April, May. It takes about 6 months for a certificate of occupancy. Anyway,
So my question is, when is that 6 months? You know, is it next year? Is it tomorrow?
It
Is it
depends on the development.
what?
It depends on the development. Once the
Yeah.
development is closed, clock starts ticking, and they have 6 months to get that onto the county tax rolls. It'll be another 6 months before that revenue is generated, counted, and comes back into the city's coffers. So you're looking at about roughly about a year.
So when the first project finishes, when does that 6 month thing start? When will it end?
Once they issue their notice to the county or to the city and to the county that it's complete, then the county will do an assessment and start including that in the tax rolls. That process takes about 6 months, and then another 6 months before it gets into our coffers. Am I answering your question?
No.
I don't understand.
When is the date where the first dollar of the revenue from the new developments will come in?
Do you want an actual hard date?
Yeah, approximate, of course.
Again, sir, it depends when we have several developments in the city. Okay, and each development that's being completed, they're not all completed at one time, they're completed in phases. So based on how each development is completed and when that certificate is issued, they vary from development to development.
Let me see if I can augment this a little bit. Before the house, and we're going to think of these revenues as independent to every parcel. So every parcel is unique. Every house in a tract of 50 homes, we're going to deal with each individually, and they're going to close, meaning they're going to pass all their permit inspections, and we'll give them authorization to sell it. But before it's built, there's still a property tax coming off of that property. It's just really low today because it doesn't have an improvement on it. It's just the land. So we receive property tax from these parcels today, but when the house is built and it closes all of its inspections, then it becomes the owner. Then it's eligible for a reassessment, and we let the county know there's a delay that Paul talked about where it has to go on the assessor's roll. Sometimes, that happens. The bills go out and twice a year or once a year, really.
December and May about.
Yeah, so the payments are due twice a year. The bill comes out. If we miss the cycle, if the house closes in July, but the bills went out in April, we're going to still catch up from the date, but there's going to be a delay on when we catch up, dating back to, let's say that the bills went out in April, but the house closed on May 30th. We're still going to begin to get new revenue as of May 30th, but it may take a year almost for us to actually go backwards and get that revenue.
In your 6 months to get the county to notify you, in my experience, that's really quick. I just finished a year ago a major remodel of our house. And we doubled our value. And I got my what's the catch up?
Supplemental?
Supplemental. I got my supplemental 2 years after sign off.
That can happen.
Oh, it happened.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for one more. It'll be 2.5 years from sign off for that one.
In my experience, the developments that are done by, builders in block quantity,
Mhm.
those tend to go quicker. They're a little bit more wired and dialed in, not saying that you're not,
Mhm.
but those typically go a little bit faster than an individual remodel, adding on a bathroom addition or something like that. Because those, you have to come in, get your permits, go back. There's a process. Builders and developers typically, not saying you're not a professional, but there's professionals that have been, this is their livelihood. They're a little bit more dialed in than you and I are when we're working. I added a room to my house. It took a while. But developers typically, it goes a bit quick. 6 months is our best bet. But even those can be delayed somewhat.
Now, you may be the better one to answer this as a follow-up. If the city keeps going with residential developments, do we have the money, general fund, for the services? Because normally I've been taught in the past that your tax base that you get out of residential doesn't really pay completely the services that those people, once they move in, need from the city.
I'm happy to take a little.
Yeah, why don't you take?
Okay. Every city has to live within its means. And what that means for different communities is service levels are going to be different, right? So if it's a property tax city, and I'll tell you, the city I just came from was a city that had very limited retail, no hotels, and it was almost entirely property tax. And that city had very, very expensive homes, but it didn't pay for the services for the fragile staffing at City Hall. That city had a property tax, a supplemental property tax that generated about $5 million a year, which represented 25% of the city's budget. So that city, which arguably would look fantastic on paper and we would expect would have the money to support its service delivery, truly would run out of money in about 3 years if they didn't continue to support that tax. And it's a temporary tax. That one has to come back each year, every, however long the term is. But right now it expires in 2027. I think the short answer is yes. If you're a city that is entirely dependent on property tax, it will make it difficult for a city to operate. So it's good that a city has sales tax revenues, robust revenues. What we as a city don't have is hotel tax of any significant scale. So the hotels that we have, one of our challenges is that we're not near a commercial corridor. There's no freeway here where we can park a couple of hotels along the road for people driving from San Diego to the desert or back and spend the night, right? So there's some upside for the city of Hemet as improvements are made to transportation corridors. As we contemplate building hotels, and we have 2 that are in the pipeline right now. that are under develop, being planned. They're not approved yet, but 2 hotels that will add additional revenue to the city. And there's not a city manager in California that doesn't love hotels, because not only they're triple threats. They produce property tax, they produce hotel tax, and they also produce sales tax, because those people go out and shop, they buy gas, they go to food, get some food, and they're fantastic for the bottom line. And it's really nice for a city to be a bit more diversified, from a revenue perspective than we are. And frankly, that's probably one of the reasons why without Measure U, we would struggle financially in a big way, because we would still try to support all the services that we have today, but we would do it with 25% less revenue. So what we have here is kind of something very similar to the city I was describing, where 25% of our revenue today is supported through an additional revenue measure.
I just have a hard time justifying building more and more residential in the city without a firmer hold on some of that budget. Because I watch other cities locally around us here that have added residential, but their people are leaving town every day to go to jobs. And those people, I have many a friend that go out of this town, and I ask them where they shop. Well, down the street from where I work. It's a lot easier. It's a lot, quicker for me. I can go and do that. Traffic might settle a little bit down by the time I'm going home. Well, who got those sales taxes? Not us.
Right. And I was recently thinking about all that same traffic pattern and thinking this is a good example of an opportunity for the state of California. So imagine a scenario where legislation is created that would allow a location like Western Riverside County to have some additional opportunity zone overlay, where the cities in this region would have, the businesses that invest job creation in these areas would have some form of a tax benefit that would help to, even out the flow of traffic, so that our residents and other nearby residents wouldn't have to drive into some of the other areas that, in fact, businesses would be looking to expand in this direction. So we have a lot of room in some of our industrial zoned areas. We can expand and support expansion of businesses, and it would be in our best interest to support some job creation in this area. But I think that some in a macro way, some help from the state would be very, very helpful to areas like this. And I imagine it would help in other areas too.
I'd like to see us slow down our housing growth until infrastructure, including budget structure. We got to, can't plan on the government for everything.
No. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Paul to cover this, and I think we may want to also invite the auditor to provide some comments about the audit.
Absolutely. I don't know that is our auditors online? Okay. Brett, jump in anytime. So right here, this is our, this is kind of a look back of our 22-23 fiscal year. This is the year we're in right now for the next month. Our beginning fund balance at the end of the year for Measure U was just south of $20 million. And these numbers, that number is audited. So we can pretty much hang our hat on that. So that's our starting point. Down here, this is our ending point. This is what we're projecting to end. So just so we all are on the same page. At the beginning of the 22-23 fiscal year, our council approved a budget that expected or estimated our revenues to be about $15 million from Measure U. Of that, the 1/3, 2/3, $10 million was police and $5 million was revenue. Our expenditure budget, which we've amended during the year, amounted to just under $13 million for police and about 8.6 for fire, leaving us with total expenditures of $21.4 million, or an estimated fund balance, what was left over, of $13 million. So you can see that our fund balance at the end of the year is projected to fall from 19 to 13, but let's talk about that. This 8.6 million right there represents our fire expenditures, but we have to remember during a fiscal year, when we get to June 30, fire had budgeted and set aside funds for 2 fire engines, chief, was it 2 or?
Yes.
2 fire vehicles. Oh, they're expensive. And we had estimated those to be built in that fiscal year. COVID supply issues, they didn't get built. So what we had to do is we had to carry that budget over, right? So that expenditure expectation didn't happen in that year. It was carried over, which grew the expenditure expectation in the current year to go up. So it's important to remember the first thing you think about when you see this 19 to 13, it's like, holy moly, the city's spending more money than they're taking in. Well, you got to remember, some of these expenditures were from prior year that were carried over. So I just wanted you guys all to understand that. Moving along, for the 19 million, what's actually happening is we're looking at about 13.6 and 6.2 for fire. And then our total revenues are still budgeting at that. This is the beginning fund balances. Expenditures were expected to come in about 12.7 and 8.6. Again, we have carryovers built in. And our ending fund balance is basically 10 and 2.5, which makes up our ending fund balance overall allocated to each. For the current year, we have a 20% reserve requirement, which requires us to have 2.1 million set aside for kind of our rainy day fund, things that we don't anticipate or expect, leaving us with an undesignated fund balance of 8.7 and about 2.2 million for fire. So these are our 20% reserve requirements. As you can see, Commission, we are way above that in both areas. Questions?
I have one question. You, in particular, I was hoping it would come up early.
Sir.
You mentioned, you asked the chief about the vehicles. Now, I understood that there was money budgeted in the past years, but because of COVID, and it takes a long time to get a truck built. But also in the past, this city has, along with a lot of other cities, has used the opportunity to take monies that were sitting in an account similar to a vehicle replacement account for fire or police and use it. Has that money been returned back to that account so that that can also be used?
Our current year budget for the 23-24 fiscal year includes a one-time use of fund balance to replenish those funds.
No, not Measure U money. I'm talking, the money came out of, as I understand, in looking at past budgets and stuff, the money came out of a budget that was heading vehicle replacement.
Mhm.
And that money went into the general fund to be used by the city.
Okay.
So it shouldn't be Measure U money following up, new Measure U money boosting back up old Measure U money.
Okay.
It should be, the city took it out, put it in the general fund. The city should be taking it out of the general fund and putting it back in. Very similar to what the state did to those of us that had a PERS account. Years ago, they took hundreds of millions out and they've never paid that back. How's that been paid back this year?
Well, we are looking at replenishing those funds. I believe we are looking at using one-time Measure U funds to replenish that fund balance.
Measure U funds, not general fund
Yes, sir.
money.
Yes, sir.
Now, what the committee can do, so we have fund balance on both the Measure U revenues, and we also have some significant general fund reserve. So, for example, if this was an area where, you know, one of our observations, and Paul and I are new to the city, so you're right. It's my understanding that the city balanced a prior budget. I don't think it was a prior year, it was maybe 2019. And we tapped a fire replacement vehicle fund for about $680,000.
683, 300.
And it's never a great practice to pull money out of, you're a city in distress when that happens, and it's better to find a way to live within your means or figure out another strategy. So I'm uncomfortable with the idea that our vehicle replacement funds don't have the adequate funding that we need down the road. And during the good times, which is a time like now where the reserves are high, it's good to make sure that those funds are filled up and that we're not going to have a problem. If that vehicle needs to be replaced at a time of economic distress, I want the funds to be there if the vehicle's, you know, done and needs to be retired. So whether the resources come from the Measure U reserve or the general fund reserve, you could provide a recommendation to the city council. Right now, I think have we set it up for,
It is set
the
up for-
recommendation is to use Measure U, but the recommendation from this committee can be to use the general fund reserve.
Is there transparency on where those funds were used? Is no longer there?
This was a 2019 budget, so we would have to pull up, I mean, basically they took $683,000 and used it to support general operations. I don't know if it was designated to a specific, department or not, but
If I may, back in those years, I'm kind of going on a side note here, back in those years, the city was in financial distress. The city wasn't bringing in the revenues to sustain the level of service that had been provided. So as a result of those practices, and the cities had done those practices for a few years, the city was on the state's watch list. And I don't know if you're aware of it, I'm seeing some nods, so it appears you are somewhat familiar with that. The city was in a bad way years ago, and the good news is we are no longer on that state watch list. So that's a good thing. And that's because we've done better in our budgeting practices. We've had to live within our means, and we have. Right now, part of the budget that we're recommending, and now that we're doing a bit better, is to replenish some of those funds that the city had taken from other funds, like the vehicle replacement funds, to make them whole. That's our goal, and that's our intention.
and I think you're going to see a slide on that same issue in a little bit.
It'll go with another similar current event question I'll have later.
Any comments from the auditor about the June 30th, 2022 numbers?
These are current year though, 22, 23.
No, he's asking.
Right, but
Oh,
this committee also has a responsibility of looking at last year's numbers also. So the auditor may want to make some comments about the June 30th audit numbers, June 30th, 2022.
Good morning. My name is Brett Van Lant, partner with Van Lant Fankenal. With regards to the June 30, 2022 audit, again, our responsibility is to audit the general fund as a whole. And within the general fund, and also internally within the city's accounting records, is a separate Measure U fund, but for reporting purposes, it's combined with the general fund. The way that the city accounts for it with regards to the Measure U funds being deposited directly into that separate internally accounted for fund, and also the expenditures related to it. That's the amounts that you guys will see in the financial statements as supplementary information. That's where that information is coming from, and it's consistent with the information that we audited. So,
Any questions for the auditor or his comments? So Brett, just to clarify, all of the Measure U expenditures were included in your audit, right? You reviewed expenditures for the entire city, including what revenue and expenditures were associated with Measure U.
correct. And in addition, the Measure U sales tax comes from the state of California, which we also confirmed the amounts directly with the state, so that the amounts that the city recorded in the Measure U internally reported funds agreed with exactly what the state indicates that they paid the city for those funds.
Okay. The economic performance for the city, you can see this chart. This is the trajectory on the fund balances. We're headed in the right direction. And now the city of Hemet has reserves that total more than 80% of our general fund revenue, general fund expenditures.
We don't have what you just showed us.
It was a slide from a workshop last week, but we can make that available. Can we print a copy of this right now?
Also, I don't see that
no, I don't print this, but if we could print the slides right now from, should someone go print copies of the budget presentation?
Oh, yeah.
We'll make some copies for you.
I don't see that screen and the stuff that was given to us in advance.
This is a PowerPoint that has supplemental information beyond what you've already seen.
But I can't see that from here. Can we get a copy of it?
Yeah, she's gonna.
Well, no, I think you're asking for a copy of this slide deck,
Yeah.
right?
And
So,
anything else that,
so she's going to print something from last week. Can we let her know that we also want to print?
Thank you.
We'll get you a copy of it.
thank you.
That's why I'm wearing glasses today, so I can see it myself.
It's also, George, a lot of times, just like in the city council meetings, it says down there staff report.
Yeah,
If you click on that, when.
I did 184 pages and
Exactly.
I just went through it all and I did not see that spot.
Okay, can you push me down?
Thank you for bringing that up.
It's an important slide.
Yeah, I like writing things down going,
Yeah.
No, I want the next.
Yeah.
one. Move that, Okay. So we talked a little bit about this earlier, and this is just another breakdown of the $16.8 million. So under the implementing resolution, which can be adjusted, it doesn't have to be the same language every year forever. But $16.8 million would break down in this following way: 2/3 of that, 11.2 to police, and 5.6 to the fire department. And so what we do is we build a budget. We take into consideration the requests from each of the city's departments, and then we craft a budget in alignment with this methodology. So sometimes we look at requests and we have to pass on those in order to balance and adhere to the council's guidance on the distribution of Measure U proceeds. Next slide.
Mark, can I
Yes.
just hop in here? Are we finished with the 22-23?
We've got.
Or in talking about it, because if so, I still had a question.
Yeah, let's go ahead and make sure
Okay.
you get your questions answered.
Second question is more of a current event. In reading social media, other people calling me, it appears that in this past week, we've had a fire truck closed down. Or
paramedic,
what do we call it? Paramedic,
it's the medic one.
medic one, there we go. Is that what happened?
We have what we call a squad. It's a 2-person pickup truck with
Which was
two.
paid for by Measure U, the truck was.
It's an investment that the city council made in the current year. And this is, when you look at the Measure U allocations, the city council budgets according to the Measure U methodology. The fire department is $800,000 over their budget. They have $2 million of overtime, a little over $2 million of overtime.
I was hoping you'd bring that up because I have a follow-up question with that before you go farther.
Let me,
Because this may help you. I don't know. I imagine it's still done this way. When we have major fires in the area, our department goes out and does mutual aid. Now, the city is repaid for that. And as I understand, they're repaid for the time of the fireman on the truck, the overtime that creates just for that team, and the backup overtime to fill in those positions. Now, again, the thing that the city has done in the past is when they got that check from the state, it went into the general fund, but didn't go back to showing that it was paying this overtime. But now, all of a sudden, it's council has said, or whoever has said, oh, I'm sorry, fire department, you're over your budget, therefore we're gonna cut a truck. But at the same time, we have Measure U funds that are overage funds sitting there.
Yeah.
Now, that truck, as I've understood, what I think I read online would be for the next 34 days, around $68,000, the cost for the running that. And how many millions do we have sitting in the Measure U? that could not have been an emergency
Meeting. Yeah.
switch over and paid for that, and the
Mhm.
citizens and our employees would be safer?
Mhm.
So I'm gonna back up and tell
Sorry
you.
to
what-
put you on the spot,
No, I'm-
but it
I don't
it
mind being put on the
burns
spot.
me bad.
Yeah, I don't mind being put on the spot. Do we know how much, what's the overtime amount that was incurred by the fire? It may be more of a Tiffany question.
Today, I'll get that.
That was reimbursed to the city. Can we get that number
Yeah, from reimbursed from,
from the state? Do you know the number?
I don't, I'll find out.
I don't, but what, and there's two different numbers. There's there's what's reimbursed, as far as the equal mutual aid, and then I think what you're referring to is the admin fee
Mhm.
as well that's collected. So, finance has those numbers.
And that's basically
Yeah.
the overtime it took to replace that crew that went
Yeah.
out, correct?
It not only replaces that crew, everything is not only is a wash,
Mhm.
but there's an admin fee above that,
Mhm.
that does come back to all municipalities that participate in mutual aid.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're kind of wandering into operations for the current year. Is your question is entering into the current operations.
Except for these 34 days.
Right. So what I'm,
Sitting with a truck down that.
so if you'll
Mhm.
provide me an opportunity to explain, I will. The city has a budget for each department. And they have a budget for overtime. And the fire department has a $2,011,000 overtime budget in the current fiscal year. As of April 24th, they were already $800,000 over that budget, so substantially over the budget. The investment in a squad is a two-person truck that that supplements an existing engine at Station 1. The engine has 3 staff on each engine. We have a paramedic on one of those on that engine.
Correct.
So we have a paramedic service out of Station 1, and we also have a paramedic on engine 2, engine 3, engine 4, and engine 5. The two-person truck on top of that is a supplement to the work at Station 1, because Station 1 is a very busy station. We do over 5,800 calls, I think, on average out of that station. It's a busy station a lot, as if you have a background in fire, you know that that's a point where you're starting to, you really should have built your next station by that time, right?
Yeah.
If you have that many calls. So the squad is a resource that helps to support that. However, at the moment, we have 3 full-time employees who are away on leave, or there's some form of absence. They're not available to us. And we also have 3 vacancies. So every one of those positions has to be paid for on overtime. And not every one of those positions is being filled by an equivalent firefighter. In fact, in the course of the last 6 weeks, in 1 week, 38% of that was the captain. Another week, it was 40%. And in the most recent 2-week pay period, it was about 24%. So, and what's being handed out to you, I think, is data from the presentation today and presentation budget workshop that the council had last week.
Correct.
So cities can only afford the level of service that we have funding to support. And right now, we're essentially we're significantly overpaying for what should be a no overtime type of service, but instead we're paying for all 6 of those positions with overtime. In many cases, we're paying for a captain's wage at time and a half for that same position. So this is an effort to contain the growth in the extra expenses on the overtime and keep those numbers lower than they otherwise would be. I actually don't have authority from the city council. I have no authority to overspend their budget. The council allocates a budget, and it's our job and it's our responsibility to live within that allocation.
So
and yes, sometimes
the council could have had an emergency meeting or et cetera to say, we want this truck to stay on, because in the past, as I understand, that truck has actually saved money by not sending out the big trucks.
When you're paying for 6 extra people on overtime, it's not going to save money.
That's the history of this city, and it may just be that other departments need to have some cuts.
Well, I'm just explaining to you the operational decision that was made by the city manager. And you're right.
City
if it comes-
manager, you or
Yes.
by them?
it's me.
Because you, okay, so
Yes.
you told fire, cut that truck because we don't have the money.
We're suspending it temporarily through the end of the fiscal year for 4 more weeks.
So essentially, the fire department is over budget because they're undermanned, because we're paying overtime for positions that aren't filled.
It's, we're down 3 people, so that's part of it.
Mhm.
And we also have 3
3 is
people
on
away
leave
on leave.
absence.
Yes. And we still incur overtime anytime one of the other firefighters is sick, goes on vacation, has other forms of leave. There are firefighters in other stations that are also working overtime for some of those shifts.
And it's difficult to fill these positions, or?
We have a lot of people in the pipeline, and perhaps the chief can help us on that side explain, but we
Yeah.
do have a lot of people that are about to move into the system.
So it's a complex, it's a very complex issue, frankly, but in the easiest of terms. Truly, that was not a sustainable way to run that paramedic squad with overtime. So actually, in this current fiscal year, we did budget full-time employees to staff that squad. Due to challenges of recruitment, and how long it takes to actually put people through fire academies. And things like that, it's been this balancing act of trying to keep the squad in service. At the same time, doing those aggressive recruitments and hiring. So I could tell you, I'm proud of how far we've come in a short amount of time. So we sent 5 firefighter paramedic trainee candidates to the academy. Those 5 are now, they're now in vacancies in fire stations. We have another 5 right now that are currently attending the Moreno Valley College Fire Academy, right? Those will be an additional 5 firefighter paramedics that go into the system. We also started hiring lateral firefighter paramedics, which we did not have that entry level position before. We only had a couple of different ways. So now we have 3 ways to become firefighter paramedics here in Hemet, which didn't exist even just a year ago. So it's this, that's kind of where we're at. I did want to make sure that I explained some of that, though, that we were being mindful as far as making sure that staff was starting to actually be assigned to that paramedic squad to be, fiscally responsible moving into the future.
And we're going to be a city that next year, because we've received a significant SAFER grant, that requires additional investments from the city. We're going to, I think the number is going to be north of $500,000 a year in additional expenditures. It's going to be critical that we contain the overtime on the fire department. So today, the overtime for this squad would be 0 through the end of the year if if all those positions were filled. And right now they're all operating on overtime. And we're pulling from the other ranks of these other fire stations. So many of 6 of our people each week, every 6 days, 6 people are taking on an extra 48, have to take on an extra 48 hours on top of the first 48 hours that they already worked. And that itself isn't necessarily a sustainable, healthy practice for a department as well, for the people themselves. So 96 hours of work each week is essentially what we've been doing for 6 of our employees.
I still didn't get an answer about
We have,
the money coming back.
yeah, let's talk about.
The okay, so to make sure I understand your question. We send firefighters out to other cities, other fires, and it's mutual aid support, we get mutual aid revenue. What you're asking is that mutual aid revenue, where does it go? Right?
And
You're
what
asking,
was it associated with a Fairview fire in particular?
It doesn't matter. I mean, go out on a major fire, truck, a crew goes out, you're paid for that. You're paid for the truck and crew that has to replace that one in the city, plus then an administrative amount. Where is that money going to? I mean, in my mind, it should go into the column to X out the overtime that was paid.
well, the overtime that was paid is paid from our general fund, correct? And it's also paid from our Measure U. So when the revenue does come in, it does go into our general fund. I'll have to look into the specific receipts that were received. I guess I misunderstood the question. I went and pulled the information for how much we received.
Yeah, I'm looking for, does it go into the general
It
fund?
goes into general fund, yes.
What's the number?
Because there's no way to differentiate who was out there. The money just comes in and we just deposit it straight into the general fund. That includes the administrative rate as well.
There should be a way of doing that. You know what firemen went out with a truck. You know whether you can look it up and see whether those people are Measure U employed firefighters, paramedics. I don't even know. Sometimes maybe the captains go. If they are, instead of a general fund, that money should move back in to replace that Measure U money.
And there is a significant delay in getting the funds back from the state of California
Oh, yeah,
as well.
they're worse than the county.
The amount, we'd have to look into that. I don't believe we do that. As Tiffany said, the money comes into the general fund, we receive it, and it goes into our general fund. The sales tax revenue that we generate from Measure U as defined by the resolution and defined by the tax, that sales tax revenue is accounted for into Measure U. Because it's what we're supposed to do. This money that comes in is not coming in the form of sales tax, nor is it coming in as sales tax derived from Measure U. Ergo, we don't account for it that way. But you make an interesting point. I had never thought of it that.
So it actually has come up and I could tell you the city manager and our finance team, some of them, Tiffany in particular, are aware of the admin fee and are receptive to looking at how we do that in the future. So I could tell you, so for example, like to the finance director's point, some of the things like what we call the FMAG and some of the things like for the Fairview Fire specifically, we're still waiting on something that the FMAG alone from the federal government will be over $62,000 that we're going to get reimbursed. So I think what Tiffany was trying to say, some of those things, they come in later. So sometimes maybe the projections are a little harder to gauge. But we can also get those. We work closely with our partners at OES to have essentially those numbers.
Yeah, the number won't, it would completely surprise me if it was anywhere near $800,000. It's, I did come out as a interested former citizen, looking at my old neighborhood to see how close that fire came. And I came out the first weekend after to look at it. But the most of the duration of the event was about 7 days.
Yeah, the bulk of it, yeah.
Okay. So I had 3 federally declared disasters in one of my prior cities over the last 5 years. And we also would send our staff out to help other cities and areas. And it was very helpful revenue that we did essentially count as revenue that we would acknowledge is helpful to the city and nets out in a good way. And we would help more than we would actually need help in most cases. But there was a time where we needed help as well. But next year, as we move into supporting the delivery of 15 extra firefighters. So what the city council did in the current year is they expanded their investment in the fire department. We added a deputy chief. We added fire prevention officer or two. We added a management analyst. And the squad was staffed at 2 people. And then after the squad was staffed and we added it to the budget last year, which was approved, then the fire department and the city submitted a grant application for a SAFER grant. This is a grant that's going to allow us to expand the service level for the fire department to include a separately dedicated ladder truck at Station 1. And as long as we can keep our overtime in check, because it's a fragile operation, running everything on, what's the number for fire? 13 million. Running it all on that money, we're going to be able to support moving the squad to Station 3, having a dedicated truck at Station 1, along with the engine at Station 1. But it's going to be very important for us to contain the overtime because we are at capacity in terms of our financial ability to support the delivery of all of this. So next year, it's great news that we have a number of up and comer firefighters that are in the pipeline, because that's going to help us contain, the overtime. When we have vacancies, it drives the overtime costs up. So we want we want all those firefighter positions filled, and then we want to keep our fingers crossed that no one is injured and things like that to contain, again, the overtime.
I think what you're getting,
Go ahead.
just as a follow-up, I think what you're getting is, I've been through this before. Watched the city council, in this case, it was for police department I was on. Just remus for all the overtime. But money that replaced that overtime from the state went into the general fund, and it was just like, it's ours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with you. It's ours.
Unfortunately, the revenue that we'll receive from the Fairview fire is not going to offset the overtime
I
costs.
don't expect it to, but I expect that the city will admit that it is there and it should be paid back into the right
It's
accounts.
revenue that's, when the revenue comes in, it's counted as general fund, and then we follow the methodology. So it would, if it comes back as general fund revenue, it's going to be allocated in 72% goes to police and fire. 1/3 of that number would go back to the fire department.
So say
Sort of one time.
you get a check. Even if it's a partial check, I don't care what the dollar amount is from Fairview. And then somebody will go back and look at, if it takes it to look at the dailies. See, okay, who was working out there on the fire? Were they general fund firemen? Were they Measure U? And then that overtime, depending upon whether, especially Measure U ones, would go back into the Measure U account instead of staying general fund. Is that what we're doing or no?
I think it depends on where our firefighters are financed from. In
That's what I'm
fact,
talking
most of our firefighters are general fund, not Measure U. So we have a slide that we'll show you in a little bit, but most of the positions, I think 3 of them are firefighters and about 12 of them are leadership and other positions within the fire department that we've allocated with Measure U. But we'll look at that and break that down.
It sounds like he wants a more clear system of how to allocate the funds versus the general firefighters and the Measure U. So there's no way to break that down. I think that's what he wants to track.
Just like that piece in the hole just keeps getting stuffed underneath the.
What he's describing is a one-time type of scenario where if there's a fire event and we receive some revenue from the state to pay us back for overtime associated with our firefighters, use of our equipment, some administrative costs. He would like us, and you can make this a recommendation to the city council, that any dollar amount coming from a fire-related incident would be allocated back to the fire budget. So that's we would happy to receive any recommendations you have, and you can make that specific recommendation. But these are one-time type of events where we don't budget for ERAF. In some cities, there's a property tax that, wanders around. Sometimes it's low, sometimes it's high. And we just don't, in a prior city, we didn't budget for that revenue because it wasn't guaranteed to actually be there. But I think it's permissible and we're happy to receive the recommendation to allocate 100% of proceeds directly related to a fire incident back. Now, in this case, there was probably some police overtime also associated with the Fairview fire. So we would also have an opportunity under a methodology like this to allocate money back to the police department as well, because we had police officers that were also involved in supporting that effort.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't mean to leave the police department out of this because this has been a, lack of better words, excuse, in my opinion, of it's our budget, and we're losing this crew, even if it's only for 34 days, but at the expense of the city, the city resident.
We could spend extra money on supporting it. And my point is that we've already substantially overspent the council's authority that they've granted to us for how much money should be allocated to fire overtime. And we could take that same money and invest it in putting detectives on overtime because we may see a heightened amount of vandalism. We could arguably ask some of our police officers to come back and work an extra 20 hours a week until we move a number of cases through the system. So the city has a lot of different needs and areas of support. This is a decision that was made to contain expenses that we would have to pay premium prices for to deliver that service. And we do have we have a paramedic on every engine at Station 1. So a paramedic does respond to every call. Okay. These are the committee's responsibilities. So we've talked about let me read this. Review the proposed expenditure plan for enhancing public safety services within the city. And we're going to take a look at some slides on this and provide comment on the Measure U expenditure plan prior to the city council's consideration and adoption of the Measure U expenditure plan. So we are going to approve the budget. We're planning to bring that to them on June 27th.
Last council meeting.
June 27th, I think. So we're going to first start with the police department reviewing Measure U expenditures and plans. So Chief, I'll turn it over to you now.
Yeah, we go to the first one, please. Okay, this is the proposed budget for fiscal year 23-24. There's a pie chart, but if you look to the right column, it'll designate where those funds are coming from. From the general fund, there's an amount of 25 million from Measure U, a little over 13.5 million. Public safety towing, those are revenues that come in that we are using in our budget, as well as public safety CFDs. CFD is a community facilities district. This is communities that we receive revenue, and this pays for personnel. So 714,000 goes towards personnel under CFD, and then we have ARPA funding, which we have amount of 315. I think that's kind of been appropriated from a previous year that we still have when it was designated for maintenance aides and cadets. Our total budget right there is 40,200,000. Within that budget, obviously, we pay internal services, personnel, maintenance and operations. So everything is a total of 40 million, and other obligations like pension and retiree medical pensions. We pay amount based on the size of our department. Now, these other included Measure U, use of one-time fund balance expenditures. Now, there's a fund balance of Measure U. Now, let me kind of explain where this fund balance came from, because there's some new members. So when Measure U began, we had a sunset clause that would expire in 2027. Obviously, as we mentioned initially, we projected 10 million a year. Understanding that there was going to be a sunset, the chief at the time and administration at the time decided, okay, we will roll over funding year by year for that rainy day. So as that continued on in 2019, there was new administration, new city manager. There was no revenue reserve at that time. From 2016 to 2019, there was not a reserve. It was just so-called considered this fund balance that we rolled over. And this fund balance in 2019, we had this revenue and reserve that came in, which this is a general tax, and based on our ordinance, if it's a general tax, you could assign revenue. So it's not right or wrong. It's just that's a decision that was made. So we have a revenue that's based, or reserve that's based on our expenditures for Measure U. So in 2019, we had our Measure U budget, we had our reserve, and then we had our fund balance. So there's three things. I don't want that to confuse you, and we don't have a slide, but I presented it at a previous measure oversight committee. So this fund balance is not a reserve. It's just what rolled over. That's what I'm getting to. So I do have quite a large amount of fund balance. And then keep in mind, we had Measure H that came in that got rid of that sunset clause. So no longer do we have to worry about, hey, if 2027 comes around and we don't renew that Measure U tax, we're gonna have to lay people off or reduce our services. And I just want to explain it so you have a kind of a history of how that came about over the years. So these are fund balance, one-time fund balance expenditures for this upcoming fiscal year. That was a lot of information for just the few, but there's quite a amount of money. So city net services, to continue city net services, we work closely with CityNet. CityNet is our homeless and outreach team. We are hoping to expand that to 4 CityNet representatives that work 7 days a week. I know based on the time and effort that my homeless outreach team, my officers are out there deal with homeless, it really puts a lot of time on those services. They do an excellent job that allows our officers to do not only dealing with some homeless, but other issues that are very significant, that are tied into homeless encampments, things like that, that it frees their time up. So that was a decision that with discussions with the city manager that I would like to continue on, because that was a one-time ARPA funds that we used the previous when ARPA came around in 2020 or 21. So the previous contract for CityNet service was 19 months. And it started in December of 2021 until it expires June 30th of this year.
Yeah, it expires when?
June 30th of this year.
Okay.
June 30th this year.
Oh,
And that initial cost was 1.3 million for that 19-month service with CityNet. That also included startup costs as well. So out of that one-time fund balance that I have, 1.2 million for CityNet services, cameras for real-time crime center. We developed, if you're not aware, we developed a first responder drone program. And this is an enhancement where we'll strategically place real RS feed cameras in all our major intersections to be able to use our crime analysts and hot spot or mapping where we know that there's crimes about to occur, and be able to have eyes on all the time. It's monitored right there, all these, so it's real time, like I'm saying. So we have somebody that's monitoring these cameras throughout the city. That's a request of $120,000 to move forward with that. Armored rescue vehicle, that is, we have currently a rescue vehicle that's over 15 years old. What we do, we are obligated, we have a obligation to the fact that we are a tri-city SWAT team. So we cover over 150 miles. We've had a SWAT team developed since 1998 with Marietta PD. Just recently, last year, Menifee joined our police department. So it's a resource multiplier. So we service our 3 cities. We really are benefited as a city with the services that we get from these other cities that come and assist us on major incidents, which the value is far beyond what we get out of it, because we do use them a lot. So that is a total of 370,000 one time. And 8 patrol vehicles. We still have some old 2005, 2007 vehicles in our fleet, to include an increase of 8 officers this upcoming fiscal year. So this is going to assist in making sure that we have a fleet that's that we could continue to provide service. This was mentioned earlier, restore equipment maintenance. Now, we just brought that back last year regarding equipment, large equipment maintenance, which is our vehicle fleet. I don't want to come back to council. In fact, moving forward after this purchase of 8 vehicles, I should be purchasing 1 or 2 vehicles every other year. Okay, that's where I should be because it's sustainable. But we did 10 years where we didn't purchase any vehicles. So we're at that point where we got to replace these old end of life vehicles. And this, the 182,000 is to bring back that internal, the restore the equipment maintenance. As we move forward, that's the funding that I would use to purchase vehicles in the future. So the total for that is 2.6 million. Next slide, please.
Any questions on this one, maybe?
Well, any questions?
What was that?
Any questions on this? I know there's a lot of information. Yes,
Two-part question.
sure.
Who made the decision to put CityNet into Measure U? And, well, that's I guess one part question.
That was
just
100% my decision, talking with the city, because just the resources it would take for my officers out in the street to deal with this issue, that it's not technically a police issue, but we're here 24/7. So we got to be leaders in our community and make sure that we're dealing with those issues. But I think that the resource of CityNet does a much better job than our officers. They spend time with these individuals. They have wraparound services. When it's a lot more difficult for my officers to get a hold of people or organizations, we do have a little, I'd say a net of people that we can reach out to, but they're not always available. CityNet does a very good job. It reduces any time that we have to spend, or the time that we do have, because when it comes down to it, if something happens, I'll tell you right now, my officers are gonna head out and say, I'll be right back. And I don't know how long this will be, but the job of CityNet is they have wraparound services and they actually spend time with individuals. If you're gonna build a rapport with anybody, you have to spend that time, and they have the ability to spend time with those individuals. So that was 100% my decision, because it's going to take a lot of time of personnel time from the police department if we try to focus on, and we're really not going to do that great of a job. And I'm being honest with you, we will try and we will do our best, but the resources and what I've seen CityNet do for the past 18 months, it's very impressive. We would get one street exit maybe once every 2 months. And we would celebrate about that, but they're doing at least 16 to 18 exits a month. And to include, we don't know, and you know what? That's one exit we know we got out, but we don't know how many exits. Of course, there's gonna be the question, what about, are they return recidivists? Are they coming back into? Possibly so. But out of that percentage, they actually had about 16 to 18 exits that month, which is a lot more than what we have.
So 18 times 12 is about 20.
It's a large.
$1.2 million to get, actually not 20, but 200. 1.2 million to get 200 people off the street.
If they, I can't tell you, we're gonna actually get them off the street, but
Well,
I'd say a small percentage, that's
Help.
5% of that. And I'll throw that
that's
number out just-
$50,000 per person to help them. Correct? Am I?
I would say that the amount of money we spend on homeless generally is a lot more than that. Yes, because there's services out there. And there's, you know, if we talk about administrative, there's always fees on top of those fees.
I come from Long Beach. And Long Beach does a really good job, but the fire department does it. With their paramedic crew, they've got a paramedic crew that just goes out and helps those people.
The heart team.
I am a graduate of the Citizens Police Academy, class number 2. And I can understand all of this because during the class, it broke down the reasons for it. They came in and talked to us. There was demonstrations and everything. So I would encourage you guys, if you have a chance, if you guys are doing it again, we can understand a lot of why these funds are allocated this way if you go through that program, if you haven't been already.
And my whole thought about this is I hate to lose something that's been so successful for our city dealing with homeless. And truly, over the years, this has been most successful. Now we're talking about possibly in the future to start develop a working with other cities, like a tri-city, not really. And I'm sure the city manager will get further into this as he rolls out his view on a Clean Street initiative, but this will really assist in a wraparound service where we can we could work with other cities to develop a plan, to actually house these people not in hotel rooms. And actually, some type of housing. But that was my decision on the city. I had that fund balance there. And if it's going to reduce a lot of time and allow our police officers to actually go out there and do police.
Bit of a stretch. I
Yeah.
don't disagree totally, but I just
Yeah.
wanted to.
Yeah.
No, it's.
And I understand. I mean, that's a concern. That's
No, the budget-
that's going to double the service as well.
Well,
We're talking about 4 representatives, 7 days a week is what we're looking at.
And I would just add that the ARPA fund balance is in the what realm right now? 1.8 million. So there is available ARPA fund balance. Should you want to make a recommendation to the council that they fund CityNet, for example, with ARPA money as they did last year, there is adequate fund balance to support it for 1 more year. But then that money, the ARPA money, which is one-time money, will go away. And if we are interested in sustaining an investment in homeless efforts, which San Jacinto and Paris also use CityNet. And so what we're envisioning longer term is connecting San Jacinto and Paris to our conversation so that we're working together and advancing initiatives and learning from each other what's working better than other strategies. And I can tell you, if we look into the future, one of the investments that someday someone will need to make is today, our street exits are primarily going to hotel vouchers. And our hoteliers tell us that they appreciate the support that CityNet provides to the people that are using those vouchers. They have also told me that they don't feel that same level of support from people that are staying in their hotel units from vouchers issued by the county of Riverside. And it's possible that multiple departments or a number of different departments or agencies within the county are sending them to our hotels with vouchers. But what CityNet provides is a form of this wraparound, but it happens at that hotel site, but they check up on those individuals, unlike other vouchers that are showing a better landing people in some of our hotel rooms. And I've asked the professionals in Riverside at the county, as well as the CityNet professionals. And CityNet runs a number of nonprofit facilities where there are wraparound services to help these individuals transition away from a homeless environment to some supportive housing and independent housing. And the better option for us long-term is to have a facility where they can transition to. Maybe it's something that Paris, Hemet, and San Jacinto can work on together. It doesn't have to be in the city of Hemet. It can be in a lot of different locations, but something like that, maybe a 2.0 beyond a voucher program that today is 75% of our exits are going to a hotel. And the hope is that they transition away from the street.
The $60,000 per person that they.
We have 207 documented homeless right now. And
But they're not being all helped.
And they don't always choose housing, and it's not a stagnant number because new people show up into that, they slip into homelessness, and we are challenged with how to work with them as well.
Are there requirements for the people that are being helped that they have to maintain to stay in the program?
You want to comment?
Yeah, so on some of the wraparound services, obviously there's rules. You and I know that some.
Yeah, but I'm talking about testing rules. You gotta give up your bottle and you gotta give up your street drugs to stay in this program. Is there those?
There are programs like that, and there's programs that are a lot lenient. And where they send those in those programs, because they build those relationships with different programs. So it just depends who's running that program.
But that's after they've actually been taken off,
Yes.
graduated off the street here. I'm talking about while they're still trying to engage them. And if these people want to stay engaged, are there rules such as that?
Oh, yeah, of course, for safety reasons and
That,
everything
you know,
else.
you've got to test weekly if you want to stick it out with our program, and we stick it out with you,
Yeah, once they get into program, yeah.
once they get into
Yeah,
program,
yes,
but not,
and no, and you know what, we had a significant, situation where I say significant, because we got somebody off the street that they were working with for the past 18 months. And to get one individual that just didn't want anything to do it and finally realized, hey, you know, I'll give it a try. And they were able to get one individual off the street. And we have, if you look at the city's website as well as the police department's website, we post some of those significant stories. If you read the city manager's updates, they're in there. And you know what? It's nice to read that, hey, we're doing some positive things out there, and it's paying. You get a handful of people off the street, it's paying in dividends. I mean, I can't say, although we're dealing with, like the city manager said, there's other individuals that are showing up on our streets, you know, but we can't stop there. I mean, we have a lot of work to do. Without a doubt, we have a lot of work to do, but we're not letting it just happen. We're being proactive. And this is really a proactive way for us to continue. If we shut this, if we could not afford to pay for it this upcoming year, it is going to burden some time on our officers. It's going to burden some time with the fire department, because it takes time. It takes a lot of personnel time. This has been such a great program, and that's why rather see it go away. I will fund it with the fund balance that I have sitting there. It's sitting there, and it should go to the people. And if we're working, I look at it this way: we're working closely with CityNet as law enforcement. That's a Measure U cost that I'm paying for, because it is freeing up time for my officers, and we're still getting the job done. We're doing a better job with assistance of them. So I still look at it as part of public safety, part of Measure U.
I'm not taking away from the program or any of that. My own personal experience has been with recovery and taking people off the street. But I've also worked within those programs that didn't have a hard line of, this is the rule, you're dirty, you're out. You know, down to the point where I can remember, and very much, my chief only knew how much time I spent with some of the people in our own Old Town area of Eureka. I had a quick example, and you can imagine the time and the just my pay that it took. I had a local lady of the night who was pregnant, heroin addict, could not get into a program because she was very truthful. When you're pregnant and you're a heroin addict and you start trying to detox, a lot of times you lose the kid. And programs won't take on that liability. And I was calling programs up and down from San Francisco to the Oregon border, trying to get her in. I spent a lot of time. So I understand that it comes down to sometimes going outside our department to get a program like that. Because in this case, you're probably right. The money is there being spent the right way. I have a personal thing about wraparound, just the term itself. But they're trained more for that frees up the officer. Because I spent hours on that. And then later on, I got further into the probation department and did a lot of recovery with juveniles and families. But I also just remember how many of them would take you for that ride for whatever services and money they could get you out of, but they weren't going to stay clean and sober. And sometimes you just gotta be that tough one that says,
absolutely,
you do this or else you're out. But
any other questions regarding this slide?
Thank you for clarifying the CityNet. Again, what it was, just a refresher. I was just like, what is this again? So
Yeah, and right now there's 2 representatives, and our goal is to add additional 2 for
Okay.
7 days a week service
Okay.
with the overlap. They do, as I said, if you look on our stats for CityNet, they'll even discuss how many people they reached out to, what locations are, so even on a map. So, and those are monthly analytics and data that's provided to the city that we put out there as well.
Have they made by chance a booklet for the officers on just a quick self-help, who's out there? This is the name of the program, this is their address and phone number, anything like that?
Yeah, they'll come and do briefings and we have direct contact with them.
Because we had that up in Humboldt County. We had, and it went out to all the service organizations,
Yeah,
public and private.
Yeah.
That had a list of all the programs. And usually in red would be those that were 24/7 or that had a answering on the weekends or off time.
yeah.
It really came in handy.
It says we're spending $1.2 million. I'd sure like to see a report from CityNet.
Yeah, we
They,
can do
they
that.
produce monthly reports for us, and are we posting those today on the website?
Yeah,
Okay. So
The last 3 months would be nice.
we could get that, not an issue. I think we have one a year in review as well. So we could get that to you as well.
Thank you.
Next slide is our 2023-24 Police Department Measure U funded positions. Now, as we get just clarification, as we get the budget, I know how much is allocated for Measure U, how much is allocated for Civilian Fund. I don't strictly say, what I do is to account for those positions, I assign a person, but I don't say that this is a Measure U person or general fund. I just, for accounting purpose internally for me, this is what I know I spend on salaries and benefits. So it's one police captain, one police lieutenant, one police sergeant. Three, sorry. I don't know why I said that. I gotta wear glasses now. I used to be okay about 2 years ago, but that's changed. 19 police officers. Now I'm gonna explain some things because there's new committee members. So you're aware of what these other positions are. One public media officers, public safety social media officer. That individual handles all our PR information, all our notifications out to the public, any incidents, major incidents that occur. He does our PIO, public information officer, so he handles all that information. Our support services manager oversees our records bureau as well as our dispatch center. So handles our dispatch center, which is a full service dispatch center because we dispatch fire and police. So you're aware of that. Our community service officer and our community service officer to me are very important. They do pretty much almost 85% of what a police officer does. They go out there, they handle past calls. They don't handle calls for service or in progress. It's just past calls. They don't carry a gun and they don't drive fast with lights and sirens. They may be at a traffic collision with lights on, but that's about it. They're in white cars, yellow lights, but they're able to complete their job and allow our officers to go out to do actual police work. So instead of having an officer tied up doing a past burglary call, which may take a couple hours, dusting for fingerprints, that individual, that community service officer can handle that. And what I look at is we've hired 3 officers from our community service officer bureau, which is twofold. And we worked on this to build that department up because it's difficult to become a police officer nowadays. Now, if I was in the training program, I probably wouldn't pass. You have to know a lot as technology, just your way around the station. For those that have been in there, it's like a maze, but you have to know your way around the city. You have to learn how to talk on the radio. All these different platforms for all, or passwords for all these different technology platforms. There's a lot to know. And this is an easier way that they get to know our way, that our procedures. They write reports, they're skilled at everything we do. They understand how to book somebody in, everything else. So they're just learning a couple of other things. So we hire them as an officer, son of the academy. they're our most successful recruits when we get them back, because really the stress is not on their shoulders with everything else. They come back and learn our officer safety skills and things like that. So that's a great position, twofold for those two reasons. And I like to highlight that because we're really doing a good job building that that bureau to include, it really relieves our officers and allows them to do police officer work. Because you know what? Police officers are very expensive. Okay, for every police officer, I get probably 2.2 CSOs. So it tells you the difference, and I'm able to provide better service out there and have our officers out there doing, you know, extra patrols out on Florida Avenue where they should be, or in the main corridors. One property evidence tech that handles all our property and evidence within our facility. So that's very important. Probably the most critical bureau in my department is our property and evidence, because there's chain of custody and everything that we take. We have to have a home for it because it goes to court. We have to present it. It's very critical. And that's for a secondary property evidence tech. Public safety dispatcher, 3 public safety office specialists. Office specialist is a records person that handles all our reports coming in with our new records management system that integrates with our computer aided dispatching. So our CAD and our RMS, and they handle all that information. And then obviously a public safety operator that's similar to a dispatch, one level below. They actually handle calls coming in. So it relieves our dispatcher from having to handle a call if they're on a 911 or some type of emergency. So that's an additional public safety operator. Any questions on those positions? Yeah.
How do you address Pat's question that the number of officers has declined?
Actually, our number has increased. We're at 78 officers. When Measure U first was implemented, I think we were at 58, and I'll say 58 because
So she was wrong.
56. No, it was no, Pat's not wrong that we had a difficult time. In fact, I have some numbers I'll share with you so you get an understanding. So this was the most significant year that we were able to continue hiring. But if we go back down from 2017-18, I hired 14 employees. Sworn was 8, non-sworn was 6. But who separated employment, I had 10 sworn that separated either retirement or left somewhere else. And I had 3 non-sworn that left. Now, 18-19, I had 6 sworn officers that we hired, 8 sworn left. I had 4 non-sworn I hired and 6 separated employment. In 19-20, I had 14 hired total, 11 were sworn. Out of the 11 sworn, 8 had resigned or retired. Out of non-sworn, I hired 3 and 5 non-sworn separated from the city of Hemet. And 2021, so 2020, 2021, I hired 6 sworn police officers and 6 either retired or resigned. Non-sworn, I hired 4 and 10 either retired or resigned. In 21-22, I hired 14 employees, 4 sworn, 11 either retired or resigned. So, and I hired 10 non-sworn and 8 non-sworn either retired or resigned. Now, 2022 and 2023, this past year, I hired 36 employees, 17 sworn, only 5 separated employment, either retired or resigned. Non-sworn, I hired 19, 7 either retired or resigned. Now, I don't know if it has to do with COVID, people coming back to the workforce, but that's a significant difference than what I was dealing with in the past. So during the inception of Measure U, I hired 52 sworn officers, or the city of Hemet, not technically me, because I just came on in 2019, and we lost 48 sworn. So this is a big difference. In non-sworn, we hired 46 and we lost 39. So we're at an upswing. We've hit 78 sworn in our budget. As we move forward, you'll see I have 82 positions. I actually have 4 in the pipeline to get hired. So my goal this year was to fulfill all those positions, those sworn positions. And to include, as we move forward for next fiscal year, adding additional 8 will get us to 90
sworn officers.
And those numbers that you just quoted include those 35 officers or positions up
And then
there.
you'll see it on the next slide too. As we go down, it will show your, like I said, separate them, but they're all Hemet police officers, but just for accounting purpose, you'll see we have general fund and what we have as Measure U. And those will be in the following. ones.
Thank you.
Okay, and this is a Measure U continued with increases that we're doing as in positions. So if you look at 23, 24, out of the 8, 4 will be paid by Measure U funding. And the other ones, as you have in your handouts, that was from previous years. And if you look at 21, 22, where it says 10 part-time maintenance aides, that was a difficult time for us to hire part-time maintenance aides, to hire anybody. So that was one of the years it was difficult. And that's those maintenance aides, we kind of pushed over to Public Works to assist with us in that hiring process. Okay, the next slide, please. And this will show you what is paid, what we have in positions, total positions, and what we've increased. And there's another slide that will depict what's paid out of, what new positions are paid out of general fund and what new positions are paid out of Measure U.
Say
Now,
that again.
Well, the next, I think a couple slides ahead will designate which positions are paid out of general fund and which positions are paid out of Measure U. This doesn't, this just tells you we're adding 1 sergeant. So if you look at fiscal year 22, 23, it's the second column from the right. We had 11 and we'll be moving to 12 additional sergeant. Police officer, we had 55 in 22, 23, and that's the additional 7. Next slide, please. And this is non-sworn staff, so it's the same thing. Here, as I mentioned, 1 constant tech, we'll be moving from 1 to 2, and that's, and I believe that position is paid out of general fund because I didn't mention my other slide. Community service officers, we added an additional 3, so that'll be an additional 14, or a total of 14. On-call dispatcher, 0.4, those are just part-time positions. We have a public safety office specialist supervisor. That's 1 position, and that's just, we got rid of an office specialist position. We just added a supervisor to have a supervisor overseeing these office specialists in the records bureau. So that's like a 20,000, and that'll be explained in a following slide. Public safety office specialist, we went from 8 to 7 because of that change. We made that position as a office specialist supervisor. The next slide. Okay, prior to go, can we skip 1 slide ahead and I'll come back to that? Okay, because it's easier for you to understand exactly where the costs are coming from. Measure U, as I talked about, 4 police officers will be paid out of Measure U, which is a total cost of $705,200. And the general fund costs are below 1 police sergeant at $261,900. These are full burden rates. That's all benefits. 3 police officers will be a total of $528,900. 3 community service officers, $281,400. And then crime scene technician, $115,300. And 1 public safety office specialist to supervisor, which is at $21,500. Not really getting rid of a position, but making one of the positions as a supervisor. So a total of 1.2 and some change. Next slide forward, please.
You want to go back to this?
Yeah, I thought we had, yeah, we'll go back to that. Now this is what, and I like to talk about this, kind of give the new committee members an idea of what we spent Measure U on over the years and what our future projects and technology upgrades will be. So in June of 2020, these are completed projects and technology upgrades. Now, some of these projects we did start in 2016, 17, and that's when I get into our microwave project and our radio. It took years to get that completed. But in June 2020, we entered into a service contract with Flock. That's our automatic license plate readers. We started off with 20 Flock cameras throughout the city, strategically placed. We were the first city in Riverside County
What this did was we increased those service contracts to double that the following year, but we also our diligence in moving forward with this convinced other cities throughout Riverside County to enter into the same service contract. So we say we are able to use that information, the service contract information that they have with Flock, to be able to solve crimes, because we could see any type of vehicle that we enter into the system or anything that we're researching when they go through those intersections that or those areas that have Flock ALPRs. Now, like I said, all of Riverside County, and we also share certain egress and ingress corridors with our counterparts with the county in San Jacinto to cover those costs as well. So we take one side, they'll take another side. And it's been a very good and collaborative effort between all the cities in Riverside County as well as the county. And this upcoming year, I'll talk about, we're going to increase the Flock cameras again this year. March 2021, we completed phase 1 of our microwave project. That was a dying system that was here prior to me getting here in 1996. And we've done a lot of Band-Aids over the years, but we actually completed that project in March of 2021. And that's our different sites with our antennas. And we're able to move forward with our PSEC, which is a collaboration with our radio system. It's encrypted with all other agencies in the county, and to include San Bernardino County, so we could all talk to each other and communicate, which has been so beneficial, especially being an island out here surrounded by county and saying, so we couldn't talk to one another and we'd be standing right next to them. So if a critical incident occurs, we switch over to a certain channel. We're able to talk to everybody as well as our partners at the fire department. June 2021, completed our new computer-aided dispatch and records management system. That's our Mark 43. That's been such an improvement, a lot of technology, never could please anybody when you're going into technology, but over the years, it really made life easier. All the work you put in ahead of time has made our lives, our officers' boots on the ground easier, as a lot of things are integrated and they don't have to do work on top of work, because you put a person's name in, it automatically auto-populates into our booking system, into the reports and everything else. So it allows us to free up their time rather than spend a lot of time of duplicating efforts. In June 2021, we went live with our Axon body-worn cameras and Taser 7s. That's our body-worn camera system that integrates with our tasers. A great platform that also integrates with our Mark 43. They don't have to go in the system and tag each incident that they turn on their camera. It doesn't have to be tagged, it automatically does that. So if they're on a call, it automatically tags and says, okay, they were on this domestic violence call, and it automatically without them going in there. So it frees up more time. Technology is amazing. Don't ask me how it does it, but it does it, and I know it does it because they're happy about it. Like I said, you can't please everybody, but they're pretty pleased with it. Also, this technology is in connection with our triggers that we have in our cars. So as soon as someone turns on their lights, their body-worn cameras will automatically turn on. As soon as they deploy their tasers and turn that on, their cameras will automatically turn on to include anybody in a 25-yard radius. So pretty amazing technology, but it helps with liability with the city and officer safety. Completion of phase 2 encrypted radio system. I talked about that. That's the PSEC. We could all talk to each other. In 2021, our trauma intervention program, which we collaborate with our fire department, it's our TIP program. It's for the community, for the citizens out there. They have volunteers coming out to kind of relieve us and really provide some great service to those that are in need. And that's our normal citizens that are dealing with a tragedy, and just sitting down and providing all the information, everything to make sure that they could, at least move on and have some closure. November 2022, we did our traffic and rocks expanded to 7-day coverage. Now, 2022 first, we expanded Flock to 20 additional cameras. So we did expand our Flock system from 20 to 40. and we will be expanding them to 60 this upcoming year. November 2022, our Traffic Rocks expansion to 7-day coverage. And that's a promise. I was out there talking to community meetings, something that I put out there and I say, hey, we have to get this going. Well, in the meantime, because I made that promise, we do have our traffic bureau and our Restoring Our Community Strategy, which is our homeless and nuisance team, working together 7 days a week. So you may see a traffic motor that's on a sidewalk dealing with the homeless. But I made this promise. I want to make sure we have them 7 days a week. So we have traffic 7 days a week and we have our nuisance team, but they're working as partners. But we foresee this in the near future, them splitting up, but both teams will be working 7 days a week, focused on what their main duties are. So future projects, technologies, expand our homeless and outreach teams. That's sitting at to include, do I have it written down, is expand our crisis intervention team. So we have a officer and a mental health clinician that ride together. We have 2. I see need for 2 more, so we're moving forward. We've already completed an MOU with the county. So you'll be seeing 7-day coverage with our clinicians riding with our officers. So, I mentioned this before. I would never have thought in a million years that we would be doing something like this, but I see the benefits of it after this occurred. And let me tell you, a lot of benefits. It reduced our response times to 5150 calls, at least 70%. Just to tell you, it's pretty amazing. So sometimes when you go out on the ledge and give something a shot, it's worthwhile and it's a really good program. So we're expanding that. We're increasing staffing by 8 additional officers, as mentioned. Add the 20 more flock systems, which is a 30% increase. Expand business crime prevention program. One of the goals is going out and making sure that all of our businesses are aware of our 602 trespass letters, which allows our officers to make arrests and be able to handle issues at nighttime or when the businesses are not open. Implement a drone first responder program. We tested and evaluated that. In this upcoming year, it's going to be fully implemented. We are continuing our test and evaluation because we don't want any lapse in time this last month, and we'll be moving forward the next fiscal year. Implementing a real-time crime center. Those are the cameras that are going to be placed at 8 of our intersections to be able to monitor from a crime center live at all times. Expand community engagement by creating a focus group. That's my community police engagement group. I see the value of looking through others' lenses from different areas of our city, different demographics, to get a better understanding of how we could provide better service to our community. I think it's important, and that's something we're moving forward this upcoming year. Any questions about those? Next slide. We talked about the personnel requests, the general fund, recruitment, events, advertising. These are supplemental requests through our general fund. Recruitment, always, as we're going to hire 8 more officers and non-sworn professional staff positions. These are fundings that we will be using for the recruitment. It's 25,000. Leads for substation. We unfortunately don't have a substation on West End. We located a place that we think is going to be appropriate, and that's for our community come in, communities or citizens to come in, and if they have any reports, any incidents, they can report it there. We take reports. It's to be housed by our service sergeant. So he will be housed over there, monitor our volunteers as well as our school resource officers from that location. Replace 20 radios. Some of our radios, technology changes. They are not replacing parts, so that's a cost associated with that, to include the increase of personnel. So it's $120,000. Addition of 20 flock safety automatic license plate readers. That's $60,000. Simpson Park UPS. Oh, that's battery replacement up in Simpson Park where our microwave system is. We split those costs with our partners in the fire department because that's what we use for communication on our regular radio system as well as our PSEC. Canine equipment and supplies, 10,000, drone program equipment, $150,000. This is not just a DFR program. There are other drones that we use for crime scenes and other areas of investigation. Traffic investigation, EDR download. This is a download system that we use for accidents. The CHP is no longer providing any assistance to us. So for us, following any cases that are involved in anything as fatalities with DUIs, things like that, we need this system to be able to file those cases. Otherwise, the DA will not file. Crossroads software update, that's our traffic collision reporting. That's just an update. We have to do that. That's $35,000. NetMotion software licensing, that's for our CAD, all our CAD information for us to have access to it is $25,000, and dispatch computer update 20,000. A lot of the stuff is just continuing things, but these are our supplemental requests. The next supplemental request for 23-24 is Measure U. It's broken down. Pension section 115 trust. All the city is involved. This is our portion that we pay out of our Measure U. 4 quarterly city CRR community cleanups, $80,000. PSEC, which are radio system upgrades, $50,000 with a total of $610,000. Measure U fund balance, city net service, as we mentioned before, is 1.2. The real time crime center 120, rescue vehicle 370, 8 patrol vehicles 770, and equipment replacement fund 182, which we want to continue forward. Total of 2.6. Public safety towing, training and education 6,000, uniforms and safety equipment 2,000, is total of 8,000. Any questions on this page?
The pension number, is that for the entire department or just the Measure U officers?
That's the portion of the police department's OPEB contribution towards the trust.
And what is, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Did you say that's just a portion of the pension?
Yes, there's above and beyond that amount for the overall OPEB contribution. Our OPEB contribution is we're required to make a contribution to our OPEB, our other.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we do is we prepay that. We prepay it into a section 115 trust.
My question is it the entire or a portion?
It's a portion for the.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Okay.
Okay.
The 4 quarterly city CNR and R community cleanups, like what is that? Is that literally going to clean communities, or what does that mean?
That was placed in our budget, I think when I was city manager, the previous city manager. And they do the cleanups for community cleanups, that the public works goes out there and advertises to bring large items or whatever to the library area. And they handle that. So I believe it's like $20,000 to clean up to pay for like dumpsters and the manpower and everybody that's out there. Right? Next slide. It's all the fire department now.
All right, who needs to stretch?
Yeah.
A lot of information. I'm sorry, just a lot of information.
You know, just a quick stretch, if anybody needs a quick stretch.
Call short recess.
Okay, I guess we'll call a short recess.
Yes.
Okay. Logistics, restrooms are around the corner over here. If anyone would like to use the restroom, it's just around the corner to your right, back here. If you're gonna lead us in stretching. I am.
It's not
Ready?
prep on.
Try.
I noticed it was.
No, I have a sore left hand.
What's that?
Checking up on me as I sit in there.
The dogs wanted out at 4 o'clock this morning and I got back in bed.
And then-
For some reason I stretched.
Run on it, the sentence is still there.
Shouldn't have done that. It was hopping around the room, hamstring.
Well, it's like
I thought we had a section that broke down all our
sitting in a meeting, I'll just work out when I get home.
general.
And so my body's screaming that you
Yeah,
can
but I
work out.
think I
before
had
before-
somewhere else.
You didn't do one?
Am I the
And
only
then we
new
ran
here
around
today?
campus.
I thought we had, how many.
Really? Okay.
This thing on
Okay.
there,
And I
like,
think,
How many measures you.
It doesn't matter.
I'm not sure.
Oh, they were all combined.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think I was looking at some other slides.
Are you?
I go by Dick, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I keep trying to get them, get rid of
Alright,
that.
Dick.
Looking at slides, and that's where I remember
Third generation.
seeing this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Brutal.
I was
How
born
many
and raised in this valley,
interesting
so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and then
So, I mean,
spent
we-
18 years in Riverside. So I was in Riverside when they passed their
Fire
tax, and it
fast.
was really locked in for
Mhm.
police and fire, and cities in the red.
Got it.
If you drive through Riverside, some of the areas that were very well maintained,
Mhm. No longer.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've
In
noticed-
short.
In short, some areas, but hey, police and fire, it's locked in.
Yeah.
Boy,
Okay.
is it locked in.
This is
That's your
exciting.
eyes always-
Yeah,
It's
because-
so informative.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
I
information.
love it. I love it. I'm excited. No,
Yeah, it
I
is.
absorbed a lot.
Yeah, yeah, so I'm like, you see it all.
Mhm.
Then we're in Paris, so we see it at work.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, because our district is in both city and county,
Okay.
and we're on both sides of the 215. So
Okay.
we're like this redheaded stepchild in the middle of Paris, Moreno Valley, the county, and city of Riverside. I think that's the best way to call our district.
Yeah. I just say we're North Paris and South Moreno Valley.
Where people go, you're where? I go, where's your school at? And I'm like, you're driving in Moreno Valley, you're on the expressway. If you drive too fast on that turn, you're gonna be at my school. Yes, I've been in a classroom, we had some portables and that are no longer there. And there were some accidents and they went right into the fence. We're like,
Oh, no.
oh, I'm gonna pick up my phone here.
Yeah.
Let them know.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's cool.
yeah,
Or not so much cool, but it's cool to know.
yeah. The kids
Where
were
you
like,
come
and I'm like, they're okay. I called. Nowadays, they'd already have their phones Be ready to resume? Okay, let's resume. Chief Sell, you're up.
Thank you very much. So for the sake of time, you're going to see a lot of similar slides that Chief Boost already talked about. So we will go ahead and start off with this first slide. So it looks very similar, just in terms of how it's put together. So the fire department proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-24. You can see our pie chart there on the left. And then on the right, much like our partners in the police department, very similar funding sources. So our general fund, so now I'm looking at that far right column, and you guys all have your documents now, correct? Okay. So general fund, 12,635,300. Measure U, 6,492,500. Safer, and that's the Safer grant from FEMA. That's 2,173,200. Public safety CFD, 331,600. And equipment replacement, 85,000, for a total budget of 21,717,600. So next we move on to the, it says the Measure U, use of one-time fund balance expenditures for the following. So again, like our partners in the police department, we have an opportunity to do some things for, in particular, capital improvements. So we have the restoration of the equipment maintenance, 683,300. And we already talked about that. So that's certainly a good thing. Making sure we have that money back. We're going to have to already look at a new ladder truck. Our existing ladder truck is approaching 20 years old. And much like the police vehicles, we had fire engines that were all, at or over their service life. So it's a good thing that we've been proactive lately, and thanks to Measure U and your support. Station 2 fence. So Station 2 that's located on Stetson and Palm, it currently has no security whatsoever around the fire station. So we had a recent break-in attempt of some of our firefighters that were on duty of their vehicles, unfortunately. So this is going to take care of that with at least putting up a good fence. It's going to provide some perimeter security there.
Is that the one that has the little
The park.
behind it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple benches? Okay.
Yep. So that's just kind of wide open, unfortunately, to the public right now. Yeah. And we all know, especially after 9/11, unfortunately, people do break into fire stations, and whether it's, for nefarious purposes or whatever, just uniforms and different things. So we certainly want to make sure that we're mindful about security. Covell building upgrades. So our Covell building, which is right across the street. So I think most of you know now that in November, the fire department added the Department of Life Safety underneath our organizational structure. So what happened with that move is essentially we took over building and safety and code enforcement, and they are now actually located across the street at Covell. And so we're really trying to make sure that we step up our customer service, so we give our residents a better experience overall in terms of being responsive to their needs. And so part of this is making sure that our staff over there, that they feel secure, that the public feels secure. So we're going to do some upgrades in the front lobby area that are kind of more to what you would find in a standard government building. So that's what that's going to be. Year 3 Motorola prepaid warranty. Those are for our ongoing communications for our radios. So this next slide, you can see fiscal year 23-24, our Measure U funded positions. So we have 3 battalion chiefs, 8 fire captains, 1 fire engineer, 3 public safety dispatchers, and 1 public safety operator. And I'll just touch on just briefly on what these positions are. So a battalion chief is a chief officer. There's 1 on shift every day, 24/7, 365 days a year. And essentially they supervise all 5 of our stations. And each station has a fire captain that supervises each fire station and their respective crew. So the battalion chief provides supervision and management level leadership at the bigger level, right? And they also serve as part of our command staff. So being a smaller fire department, in the, compared to obviously some other municipalities, we have to wear many hats here, right? And so each one of our battalion chiefs also serves as a bureau commander where they actually oversee multiple programs. And that would include operations, EMS, support services, community risk reduction, and then fire prevention that we have a liaison with. And then I kind of touched on the fire captain, fire engineer. Everyone says that's the best job in the fire department. That's driving, the big red fire engine. And then once you're on the scene of a fire, you're also now making sure that the firefighters have water and engaging the pump. So really important job making sure our folks are safe. Any questions on that one, or does that cover quick little definitions on those? Okay, good. Okay, so this slide, we talk about the fire department sworn staff. So on the left-hand column, you have the positions, fire chief, deputy fire chief, fire battalion chief, fire captain, fire engineer, firefighter, paramedic. So those are all the sworn positions that we have under the Hemet Fire Department. And I'll just take you to the far right under the fiscal year 23-24, what's proposed. So you could see that that the changes are going to be to fire captain. So we're increasing from 15 to 18. That's because we're going to put the ladder truck into service. The fire engineers from 15 to 18, again, because we're putting the ladder truck into service, and that'll be the critical position of actually driving that ladder truck. And then once that person is at that emergency call, they're responsible for actually putting up the aerial ladder, which if you guys haven't seen the big long ladder truck, that's 100 feet. So, now that we're kind of going vertical with some new hotels, we obviously have the hospital here. We want to make sure that we're able to actually perform rescues. The ladder truck also serves as our rescue specialist. So they have auto extrication for, unfortunately, especially like on Dominagoni and a lot of other streets around our town, people, drive rather fast. They get into some pretty bad car accidents. And so our team on the truck actually has you've heard of the Jaws of Life. So they have the Jaws of Life and all those other specialty tools. Firefighter, paramedic. So we're going to go from 18. And why it's 18, and again, that goes back to that conversation about the squad. Last year, I had the vision and just kind of the strategic planning of looking forward, of knowing that we needed to be mindful of reducing overtime and having positions on that squad. So that's why you could see that we went from, in fiscal year 21-22, from 15 to 18, right? Again, but we're just battling the fact of trying to, hire as quick as we can, get people through training, get people, out into these positions to fill these vacancies. And then now over to the far right, our proposed firefighter paramedics for 23-24 will be 24. So it's great to see the capacity increasing, as far as boots on the ground, which I know is important to measure you. So you can see the total positions now of sworn staff is up to 65. Next slide is our fire department professional staff. So again, we could see the positions on the left. We have fire prevention officer, emergency services coordinator, management analyst, administrative assistant, office specialist, 2, I need glasses also, office specialist, part-time, public safety dispatcher, and a public safety operator. And I'll touch on a couple of those. So fire prevention. So just in 1 year, we unfortunately, just due to a lot of the prior recession and a lot of setbacks that the city has gone through, there wasn't a formal fire prevention program, and now there is. And so because of it, our 2 fire prevention officers alone have actually inspected every single school in Hemet, which is great. And that's a state mandated, as you guys probably know, state mandated SB 1205 inspections. So we're taking that though in phases to the next level. And part of that is going to actually involve our companies that are in fire stations, including our new ladder trucks. So for example, when they're not actually running emergency calls, part of what they're going to do is fire prevention. So we're going to be proactively going out and doing these business inspections, and there's roughly over 3,000. So when we start talking about what we call Rs, that's residential inspections.
Mhm.
Bs, those are the business level inspections. Those are all things that our fire department now is going to be actively engaged in. So it's very exciting, to have a safer community that embraces community risk reduction. Our emergency services coordinator, if you haven't met him, that's Jay Krajine. He's doing an outstanding job. So he really has brought CERT back to life, so to speak. We didn't hear a lot about our CERT team for a couple of years, but Jay is out there actively talking to our different homeowners groups, community groups, and he's providing training very frequently now in terms of CERT. And if you guys need any of that, make sure that you get a hold of us and we can get you in touch with Jay. So I just kind of wanted to touch on those positions.
I'm
Ma'am?
sorry, what is
Yes.
CERT, like a community program or?
Yes, ma'am. So it stands for Community Emergency Response Team. So they are volunteers in the community that are really an extension to public safety. So unfortunately, we talk about the big one, right? Which we are kind of on borrowed time,
Right.
right? So it's not when, it's just, it's not if, it's when it's going to happen. And we know that whether it's the Fairview fire, whether it's, some other disaster, CERT is an extension of public safety that it can definitely help us out when it comes to evacuation, helping with, rehab shelters. They have basic first aid skills. They know how to, shut off utilities, things like that. And so if any of you, need any of that training, just make sure you let us know. That's a great program. Yeah. Our management analyst, that's a new position that we just started in this current fiscal year. Kimberly Reeder, she came just with a lot of great backgrounds and qualifications, and it's been so nice. Part of this vision and strategic planning of I use this phrase, what does right look like, right? And so I'm proud of, he's done a fantastic job, and I think PD historically has done a really good job of having succession planning, of looking forward. The fire department, unfortunately, has had some different setbacks and challenges. So now that we have some support, frankly, and we're moving in the right direction with some strategic planning. Part of that is building foundation, though, right? And adding the foundational pieces of a deputy fire chief, a management analyst, the fire prevention officers. Those are things that we didn't even have. So, and I always like people to do their own research of a similar size city and what again, right looks like. And we're moving in the right direction, which is really nice. So, on the far right column, if you can see fiscal year 23-24, again, no changes compared to last year's budget. So for a total of 10. So this slide talks about our Measure U major projects and tech upgrades. March of 2021, we completed phase 1 of our microwave project. Again, that has to do with our communications, and much like our police department counterparts, and making sure that we have appropriate communications to speak with our regional partners, and then also with our police partners. Upgrading the failing VHF radio system. And failing because it certainly needed a lot of love and making sure that we made those upgrades. And part of that is with, VHF radio system requires repeaters. So you can actually, if you key the radio, it has to send a signal, and we have to make sure that goes to a broad geographical area. June of 2021, completed new computer aided dispatch and records management system. So this now gives us a way to actually, pull data. And you certainly, can't move forward if sometimes you don't know where you were at, right? And query important data. That's very important when it comes to response times and other things, and breaking down calls that we go on. July 2021, completion of phase 2 of the encrypted radio system. That's the PSEC radio that Chief Poos talked about. And then we were able to establish a backup system. Under capital improvement, or capital equipment, we replaced the 3 fire engines. So engine 1 was placed into service last year. In fact, that picture is when we did our push-in ceremony, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
We have 2 additional fire engines that are going to be pretty much exactly like engine one. Unfortunately, due to the supply chain issues, we were supposed to see them this summer,
Yeah.
and the manufacturer pushed it back next year, a whole additional year, which is really a bummer. But it's just not us. It's, yeah, I think you guys are experiencing the same thing, and my peers in the fire service are experiencing the same thing. So, we got to keep taking the gift cards over to, fleet services and make sure that they're keeping up with the current fleet, and they're doing a great job, by the way.
You got a good welder then.
And again, yeah, there's everyone working together, and it starts with that engineer checking that rig every day, and then making sure that we're staying on top of, the vehicle maintenance. So, but it'll be great when we actually see those 2 additional fire engines, show up next year. We were also replaced the 3 utility / squad response vehicles. So again, we have the versatility of using that as a paramedic squad unit, and then also as a utility, either in the city or regionally, if we go out on a mutual aid assignment, for example. Our strike, some of our battalion chiefs are trained to be strike team leaders, and so they might be the leadership of 5 other fire engines that go to a fire in Northern California, for example. So that gave us that capability to have that piece of equipment. And then we added a 6 dispatch console with again a goal of one day having what we call emergency medical dispatch here. We are a very busy fire department. We run over 18,000 calls a year. So one of the things that we're always trying to do is figure out how we can be innovative, how we can make sure that the workload is distributed in the appropriate way relative to the resources that we have. This next one is a summary of fiscal year 23-24 personnel requests. So you can see under general fund, we have 3 firefighters that are going to now go to captain. That's because of the truck that we're going to put into service, right? You can't, the ladder truck has to have an engineer driving, a captain that sits in the passenger seat, that's the supervisor, and then a firefighter paramedic that's actually going to be driving the back end of the big long tiller truck, right? So you cannot have the 3 firefighter paramedic positions. So that's what this slide talks about. It talks about the difference of what that's going to cost for those positions. So that's 3 again firefighter positions that are going to promote to captain, and then 3 firefighters that are going to promote to engineer. Okay, and then so this slide right here talks about our additional supplemental requests. Well, not additional, just our supplemental requests. And under the general fund, you could see for arson conferences, $3,500. So now that our fire prevention bureau, we continue to phase in what our capabilities are. Part of that is also fire investigation. So again, we've been relying on CAL FIRE and the county fire department to come in on critical incidents. And so now that we have, the capacity to start doing that with our people that have the requisite skill set and training, this is something that we're able to support, which is great. Moving down, you can see under Measure U that just like our police department partners, our portion of the pension section 115 trust, $240,000. And then going down, Measure U fund balance. So we touched on all these items already. That's the restoring the equipment replacement fund, the Station 2 fence, the Covell building upgrades, and year 3 of the Motorola prepaid warranty. Again, for a total of $879,200 for our fiscal year 23-24 supplemental requests. A vehicle replacement, that'll be a vehicle for the deputy chief, and that $85,000 covers. It's not just the vehicle cost, but also the upgrade for the light package and the radios, and that's what that sum of money is for. Okay. All right.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the arson. Do we have our bug back? And all these dumpster fires and little grass fires, is our famous bug back in the area again?
Yeah, I don't know about, exactly who's behind it yet, but certainly we have our folks that are following up and conducting fire investigation on. We have had a recent upticks in grass fires, and yeah,
Ramona, then immediately
Right,
Moreno Valley,
right.
it just back of my head started.
Well, yeah, and I can tell you, recently attended the Riverside County Fire Chiefs meeting and all the area fire chiefs share the concern. We all see how tall the grass is right now. And all that rain did was really make it mad, right? So now it's double, triple in size. So really the strategy is going to be that we're going to hit it as hard as we can as soon as these fires start and really try to, keep it out of the thicker brush and certainly out of structures and homes.
I know it's not your area, but in case the smoke trickles down, I spent all half a day yesterday and all morning this morning with CAL FIRE just on Park Hill alone. I'm in an area that is a high fire zone because of Park Hill. And I look up there and the fire load's like 3 times as much. And all they ever do is put maybe a dozer blade wide at the bottom. So in case you, chief to chief, you get some word, somebody from Hemet's really stirring it. That's me.
All right, no, thank you.
You're adding an assistant fire chief and I support that. Can't you eliminate one of those battalion chiefs? Because it looks like you have an awful lot of top management.
Well, I wish I could eliminate somebody. No. So quick, short answer is, so we already have the deputy chief. That's something in the current budget. So that provides
You
now.
have a physical person?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, a physical person that came from the San Bernardino County Fire Department. Very, very qualified. And I can tell you, for me personally, it's been an absolute game changer for our admin and for our people. We can't support our people. We can't grow without foundational pieces. Now, the battalion chief that you referenced, we have 3 shifts: A shift, B shift, and C shift. So each shift requires that oversight and supervision by one of those battalion chiefs. And again, they're not only the battalion chief that supervises the entire city on behalf of myself, as an extension of our city leadership, but they also wear all those different hats of operations, EMS, support services, fire prevention, community risk reduction, hazardous materials. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of how they operate.
How much overtime do the battalion chiefs pull down?
I don't have a figure off the right, I can get that to you.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
you're welcome. And yeah, and you came from Long Beach, sir?
Yeah.
So did I. I can just tell you, so there's 3 here. We had 13 and a total of 20 fire chief, 20 chief officers in Long Beach. So our folks are doing a great job with what we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
You answered. Thank you.
I want to augment both the police chief and the fire chief with a bit of background that we distributed. We gave you copies of slide decks, and this is from last week's budget workshop with the city council. And we've also emailed that to you. But I want to draw your attention to page 20 of this. It really, if you just look at the curve, this is the story that I think is important for us to discuss in the context of the numbers that you see today. We're a city that, coming out of the Great Recession in the 08-09 era, we're a city that struggled financially just to keep our head above water. And our crime rate peaked about 14-15. It's been on the mend ever since, and we still have ambition to reduce that crime rate much lower, but it's near state averages today. And it was above state averages not that long ago. We, from a budget perspective, our reserves dropped to the lowest level in 2017. There were some strategies deployed in the early 2010 era to balance our budget. There was a large infusion of cash from CR&R when we cut a deal with the garbage company. So there was a significant deposit that essentially allowed the city to keep its head above water. But absent that, we would have had.
Don't they owe us some services though on a weekly basis around here?
We will hold them accountable. There remains a approximately $5 million of what's the right phrase here for the trash?
Franchise.
Franchise fee that's contributing revenue to our budget. But when you look at this chart, we've had extraordinary economic performance over the last couple of years. And today, when we look at this number, it's $54 million as of June 30th last year. So June 30th, 2022, the city has general fund reserves of $54 million. The city today, the reserve policy really looks only to the general fund side. Measure U as a general fund revenue, but think of it as the non-general fund portion of the revenue. Our policy is 20% of that number, and we have begun to set aside 20% of the Measure U number as well. We're projecting to close the year with a few more dollars, so this number is likely to grow. But we think it's so large at 80%. And some cities, we choose the level, right? That city's policy is 20%. So we really need somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 or $12 million, which means we have a lot of extra one-time money available. And because we're unable to earn as much money as inflation is growing at, we're essentially seeing some of those dollars evaporate if we don't put them to work. And we know that we have some pretty significant challenges with our streets. We have $49 million of catch up that we need to make on our streets, and we're not going to do it in 1 year. In fact, it would take us an extraordinary amount of time with the available resources to catch up on the streets. But a lot of what you see today in the proposed use of Measure U, as well as on the council discussion, because the council non-Measure U numbers are significant as well, we're recommending use of one-time monies to replenish equipment replacement funds, to invest in one-time needs for the organization. But what we're not doing is investing those numbers, those dollars in ongoing operations. We can look at CityNet as one possible exception to that because it is a service, but it would go away at some point. And hopefully we can help them work themselves out of a job over time. If our homeless numbers come down through the efforts that we're making, we won't need to invest as many dollars as we do today in CityNet. But we're recommending for Measure U as well as the general fund to tap some of that one-time money that's so significant and put it to use in the community. So I wanted you to see the bigger picture on what's happened with the performance of the general fund reserves. And I'm happy to answer any questions here because I think that leads into the action items that we have for you today.
I don't have a question on that, but I saw in the balance sheet, $190 million as an asset for right of way. What is that?
Where did you see it? I'm sorry.
On the balance sheet, $190 million right of way as an asset.
It's probably streets, right? And the way Gatsby is now asking us to report.
Are you talking about your review of the ACFR?
I have to find it somewhere in all those papers.
Is he? Well,
I think it was in the 184 page.
okay, that sounds like the ACFR. About 15 years ago, Gatsby, I'm going to throw some acronyms at you, and if I lose you, just tell me. We have to follow certain procedures that are established by the SEC via Gatsby, governmentally accepted accounting standards. And 15 years ago, they required, I'm going to try and not get passionate about this, but they required that cities report their assets and their liabilities on their balance sheet. Okay. So in order for cities to do that, we had to do an infrastructure evaluation. Every city had to do it, and it's got to be reviewed every 2 years. What we had to do is we had to go out physically and value and estimate every road, street, curb and gutter building within the city. Then we had to identify the liabilities associated with each. Between you, me, and the fence post as a temporary employee, I think it's a huge waste of time. There, I said it. Because if I put an asset on my balance sheet, that's $194 million, I'm never going to be able to realize that. I can't really borrow against that. So the purpose of putting that on my balance sheet is an overstatement of the city's assets. I'm getting passionate. I got to stop. That is what that is. And
So it's the streets and roads.
streets, roads, curbs, gutters,
Okay.
infrastructure, buildings, Utility lines under the roads, no, don't get me started,
Okay.
but that's what that is. It's an
That
asset.
way be something totally different to me.
It's an asset to the city, but good luck trying to borrow against it or sell it.
The other question I had, there was $7.6 million due from other governments. What is that?
That has to do, I might let Tiffany field this one, but that has to do with accruals at the end of the year. And I'm going to try and answer it this way. The city participates in, oh God, I'm having a brain fart. I mean, I'm forgetting. It's CDBG. There it is, CDBG. So CDBG provides us with funding through the approval of certain projects. Okay. Every year that I've been an auditor and every year I've been a finance director, when I come into a city for the first time, I always look at the balance sheet. And CDBG, the line item in the balance sheet should be zero, but it's really negative. Why? Because when we enter into CDBG approved projects, I have to spend that money ahead of time. Then at the end of the year, I submit my reimbursement request to CDBG and they pay me back. So a lot of my due from other governments has to do with grant programs that are similar to that.
Okay. That's it.
Okay, so the action items today are to receive a presentation regarding the 21-22 Measure U expenditures. Those are that long 184-page document that you're talking about is our audited financial statements. And the questions are for this committee, are the audited expenditures of police and fire in line with resolutions 4703, 4731, and ordinance 1918? Essentially, committing 2/3 to police and committing 1/3 of those proceeds to the fire department. And then secondly, does the committee authorize the chair and vice chair to sign a letter affirming the findings from this question on behalf of the Measure U Oversight Committee? So that's the first section. The second is to review the proposed expenditures of Measure U proceeds for 23-24 and provide input on the committee's report to the city council for planned expenditures. Now, this is where you've raised there were earlier questions about CityNet that you may want to weigh into. You raised questions about fire expenditures related to the squad, and you raised questions related to reimbursements that are then presented back to the general fund, and you may want to consider including something like that into a letter that you can authorize the chair and the vice chair to submit to the city council. So first,
Is it cleaner if we split this into two letters?
I think it is. I think it is. So I think if we start, Chair, with the first question here. and the two
Okay.
Sub questions.
Yeah, I was thinking the same, because that's a lot. Okay, so we'll split this into two. So can I get a motion for the audited expenditures of police and fire in line with resolutions 4703, 4731, and ordinance 1918? That's the first question.
I'll move that you guys can sign a letter approving that they did follow those resolutions. And as a side to your new members, this is where we get into the accusations that all we're doing is rubber stamping. And when it comes down to it, yeah, a lot of it, because these resolutions give us line
Yes,
things.
very direct.
It's very
Very
direct. So if
direct.
there's something in there that isn't, this is where we can say that.
Page 3.
But I did not see stuff, so I would make the motion that we write such a letter.
I'll second that motion. Okay. All right, since we have a second, city clerk, maybe we have a roll call.
Motion by committee member Clark, second by committee member Kane. Committee member Kane,
Yes.
Chair Chenault,
Yes.
committee member Clark,
Yes,
Vice Chair Schaefer,
Yes.
committee member Silva.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Okay, the next part is, we look at the recommendation number 2. We need to get a motion. It's regarding review the proposed expenditures of proceeds generated by the transaction and use tax for fiscal year 23-24, and provide input on the committee's report to the city council for planned expenditures in fiscal year 23-24 stated in ordinance 1918. Can I get a motion?
Can we have a little, I know we've been long-winded, but can I get a little bit of discussion?
Yeah, let's
first?
get some discussion on this one.
I went back into my notes. And one of the things on the resolutions is and I think it was a line item also, a pro rata. So somebody working, I don't know, is it fire that has a person that out of personnel that does just Measure U personnel work? Is it you guys? Somebody that,
Are we talking about fire's portion and PD?
yeah,
Towards the human resources person?
there we go, there we go.
Oh, okay, yes.
Now, I don't have a problem with it, but I think the position we have in this committee is to make sure for the community
Mhm.
that anybody that is paid with those monies, it's the amount of time they're putting in. Percentage wise, say they're doing 50% of their work is related to Measure U type stuff,
Mhm.
are they being budget wise, 50% of that being paid by Measure U, or is the whole position?
I don't quite recall how we do the allocation of that number. But I believe, don't hold me to this, I have to go back and look, but I believe when I first got here, it was explained to me that we looked at police, fire, and the non-police fire as a budget total, and looked at the percentages and applied that. But I'm a little squishy on that. I have to go back and firm that up, sir.
That's the only thing that
I can follow up that it is fully funded by police and fire split. So it is all Measure U funded for that person.
and that person's job that they're doing is 100% of that.
That
Yes,
I
to that.
cannot speak to.
That's the part that,
I think that pro rata was designated for like we pay internal services or mechanics and things like that. So there's a certain percentage of our Measure U because of personnel that we pay towards that. I don't necessarily think that is that position.
okay. I was trying to
Yeah,
pull an example
I
out.
know, I remember reading that as well,
Mhm.
but I'll have to go back and review it, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
I just think as this committee is representative for the city as a whole, if we find a position as being paid 100% out of Measure U, but they're only doing 5% of their work toward Measure U,
Mhm.
we got a problem there. And I want to make sure that is answered for the citizens.
We have 5 people in human resources, is that right? 5,
4.5.
I think it's 4.5.
4.5, okay, 4.5 people in HR, and I think we are probably allocating somewhere in the neighborhood of 72%. You know, again, 79% of the dollars that we invest each year in the budget are invested in the police and fire departments. So most of the recruitments that HR is working on, most of the processing of, pay increases, requests related to their benefits, et cetera, are coming from police and fire. So basically 4 out of 5 employees are filing that way. But I think it's likely that we're allocating, I don't know about the director, but at least the other 4 were being allocated partially to police fire versus non-police fire. Is that accurate, how you're accounting for it?
One of the analysts is dedicated to Measure U funding source. What they're working on, I mean, all of the personnel work on Measure U related items, but just one person is funded through it.
1 out of the 4.5?
Right,
Okay,
but they all do.
They all do the work.
okay, so we may be under, in this case, we may be under, essentially allocating dollars that are likely invested in police and fire related matters. But again, Measure U is only 25% of our general fund. So if we think of it as one of 4.5, that's about right. My own position could be allocated. We could allocate, because I work on Measure U related matters, but I don't think we're allocating any of my compensation or benefits to Measure U, right? It's all in the general fund. So that's another example. There are some positions that will spend time on Measure U related matters that we're not charging to Measure U proceeds. But I think it's essentially what I'm hearing is it feels like it's in line with the numbers.
I had another city that I worked on the same type of committee. And they had 3 people that had nothing to do with that money that they were paying them complete salary benefits, the whole works for. So I bring that question.
No, thanks for asking that.
Any other discussion? Okay, all right, can I get a motion?
Big mouth here. The only other thing is I'm looking
Yeah.
for if our committee agrees.
Mhm.
I do not recommend that Measure U money be used to repay the vehicle replacement fund. If that money was taken out, used in general fund purposes,
Mhm.
that should be repaid by general fund and not by additional Measure U money. And that would just be down as a recommendation to the council if this committee agreed. If not, I have no problem using my 3-minute time at the beginning of the city council meeting.
But, I mean, whether it comes out of here, or comes out of there. I mean, it is gonna help the safety. It will cut the maintenance cost.
But you have a perception in this city, and it is rogue. I mean, if you went through the Measure H election. it got really nasty
Mhm.
of needing to show where those monies come from and what. So. If that money was taken out of that and put into general fund, and if those monies were Measure U, or portion of the monies were Measure U to start with,
Mhm.
So
it
what,
should be replaced by general fund.
so what would you do with the money that was left in Measure U?
I would be paying for the 34 days for the unit that we just put down. But I understand where that comes from.
That was $600,000 if my memory serves me for the,
64,000 or 54,000 for the.
no, for the replacement of the
Mhm.
upgrading of the equipment was a big number.
I don't know how much, I don't remember what the exact number was that was taken out of the original replacement fund.
To the for fire, 683, 300, and then PD was under 200.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
It would, and I think this is a very healthy recommendation. We do have more money on the general fund reserve than we do on the Measure U reserve. And so clearly the general fund reserve can accommodate that change.
Mhm.
And if the total is about 800,000, 900,000, 870, 880, somewhere in there, it's something that the general fund reserve could accommodate. So I think that's a recommendation that the council will look at carefully.
Include that in the letter. Yeah. Be good in the letter.
We'll see what the vote.
Okay. All right, Ken. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, can I get a motion?
To what effect?
It would be with the expenditures. You wanna word it?
Okay, a motion would be to, for us to approve that, 2 people in our group here would sign a letter to the city council stating that, the proposed expenditures for 23-24 has been reported to us and discussed, and that, they appear to follow the ordinance. And in my opinion, and I'd like to see, would be that you could put down, there was discussion and a recommendation that Measure U monies not be used to repay the monies that we're taking out of the vehicle replacement fund.
Mhm.
And instead, to friendly amendment.
That's your motion. Is there a second?
But just a clarification, and in lieu of using Measure U dollars, that you also still support the idea of refunding, or I'm sorry, to refunding
Mhm.
Yeah.
and placing more money back in, but from the general fund reserves, not the Measure U reserves.
Exactly,
Yes.
yeah. JP, you got that?
Yes.
The poor guy in his best figures out.
I have a motion. Did I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, a motion by Clark. We'll do a roll call. Committee member Kane,
Yes.
Chair Chenault,
Yes.
Committee member Clark,
Yes.
Committee member Schaefer,
Yes.
Vice Chair, excuse me. Committee member Silva,
Yes.
that motion passes 5-0.
Okay. We'll move on to item 8. Does the committee have any comments?
I couldn't hear you.
Does the committee have any comments?
No.
None?
Do we have isn't there a special Measure U audit, or is it all being done within the city audit now? Do we have that coming up?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because I think this is hopefully helpful for the bigger picture. The city's annual financial audit includes Measure U,
Mhm.
and it always has. However, the council, I think it may have been my first meeting, so this was probably late February,
Mhm.
asked for us to bring back some recommendations on looking back at historical Measure U related expenditures. And let me back up from that a little bit. So I owe them a report back, and I want to talk to you about what we're planning to do. But when we go backward and think about Measure U, I'm going to go back to the special versus general tax. Measure U is a general tax. If it was dedicated for a specific purpose, like police and fire, it would have been a special tax. And it would have been 100%, money spent on police and fire. Because it's a general tax, it can be used for any municipal purpose. And so that's something other than police and fire could be done, but this city council, both before it was voted on and after it was voted on, said we'd like to take 100% of those Measure U proceeds, which today equal 16.8 million, and invest those in police and fire. And so while they have a right to change their mind on any given Tuesday, that is the methodology that they've established for us to follow. So we follow that methodology. And what that methodology does is it essentially gives us a number for the police and fire department to work within each year. So to help me, I think this will be actually very helpful for me, just to understand a little bit of the history. And to really erase any concerns that people have that money was used in an inappropriate way. The city's been building, my understanding is the city's been building budgets since 1617 with a 2/3, 1/3 allocation for Measure U. And that's why this committee looks at these numbers each year, and why the implementing resolution calls for you to make a report to the city council. But it's what I'm going to recommend to the city council is that we bring in an independent auditor. We've determined in looking at this that the current auditor is unable to perform that work for us because Paul works for that firm. And so we need to bring in a different auditor firm to do that work. And so we'll be bringing something back to the city council relatively soon that says, we're recommending, well, here are some options for you. Should you be interested in investing X number of dollars in taking a look at a full inventory of all of the expenditures since inception to present to the city council, to present to the Measure U committee. We will then invest those dollars, whatever it takes to do that. We have all the data, I think. Fair to say, we have the data. And I think independently, as the new person in town, and knowing that there's some people that have concerns about this, it's good to be clear on exactly how the dollars were invested. And frankly, as we transition from what was really initially considered going to be a temporary tax to the realization that with Measure U taking off that sunset, these are proceeds that are going to continue to flow to the city. There's one potential exception, and I want to make sure this is kind of another sidebar. There's going to be a state ballot measure in October of 24, right? November of 24, that will potentially require the city of Hemet and the city of Corona, any city that since January 1, 2022, I think that's the date, any locally approved ballot measure passed by local voters since January 1 of 2022. So Measure H, the sunset falls into this category, will require the city to bring that tax to its voters every 5 years. So what this means
state
is
funding for that election, right?
so we pay for us to continue to ask the question that costs us, I don't know, 30 or 40, $50,000 an election to ask a question. So we're going to be, if this passes, state law changes, and then we would be required every 5 years to bring over a quarter of our budget to the voters every 5 years. It's similar to that city I was describing earlier, that truly, you know, the amount of investments that we're making into our police and fire departments and into our city is extraordinary. We're talking about dozens and dozens of positions that are funded by Measure U and all of the equipment that comes with it. So it's such an important revenue, and it's allowing us to tackle things that we haven't been able to tackle in the past. And on this chart, blue is Measure U. So while the general fund revenue in yellow has had an exceptional performance, so is the Measure U dollars. But we're deeply invested in use of these proceeds, and they do have a meaningful impact in our ability to deliver and sustain service levels, particularly on our police and fire departments moving forward. So we'll talk more about that ballot measure, you know, over the course of the next 12 months, because it's an important one for Hemet. It's a very important one. And meanwhile, when we have a report come back to the council, I think that's a good topic for a future meeting, is when the city completes its work. If the council, you know, the council still has to make this decision. So they would have to basically pay a consultant to independently look at our revenues. So we don't have a cost estimate for that right now, but it probably isn't substantial. All the data is there. Then they would render a report to us. We would be interested in sharing with that information with you as well, and the citizens.
It was stated that the CityNet contract expires June 30. Have we done anything to negate that or carry it on?
No, we've drafted a budget that has a placeholder for continuation of CityNet. And so it is a proposed expenditure for Measure U. It's included in a draft budget that we still have some money to solve for. Our animal control costs are going up by several $100,000. It's a late breaking issue that we have to figure out how to balance the budget on. And we have another $450,000 item that we're working on to solve. And so we have a couple of moving parts between now and when we bring the final budget to the council. There could be some additional service level impacts if we're unable to find a more affordable way to address animal control in one other item.
But for the city council to extend the CityNet contract, do we have to approve that?
We would. So we would bring that to the council, I presume, on
No, to this committee.
To extend the measure, to extend a contract with CityNet.
Yeah.
We would not need to bring it to this committee. No, today we talked about the recommendation to use one-time Measure U fund balance to fund that operation. That will be a recommendation to the council. And then the council will have to act to actually enter into that contract amendment. So you were providing a recommendation to them. They will have to make a decision to say yes or no to the recommendation. And the staff will be recommending that as well. But until the council says yes, we are unable to extend the services beyond July 1.
Is that gonna be in the last meeting of June?
Yes,
Oh, that's gonna be a long night.
I'll drink lots of coffee that day.
Yeah. City council interviews, budget.
But then they'll have the definitive numbers from Sacramento.
Interviews are on the 13th.
13th, that's right. That's right.
Okay. More comments? Okay, moving down to item 9, future agenda items. Does the committee have any future agenda items you'd like to add?
I think we ought to schedule a meeting sometime soon.
Okay, that's our next one. Okay, so there's nothing there, so move on to item 10, the next meeting date. Does the staff have a tentative meeting date planned?
No, your work for the tasks between now and the end of the fiscal year are complete today. However, and I don't anticipate that we would have the Measure U analysis, the summary of all of the expenditures done. We're going to need to enter into a contract, appropriate revenue or appropriate resources to that. That's probably 2 months out minimum.
At least.
Yeah. And so I think it's fair to say, we don't know, when that report will come back, but we could work with you shortly after that to schedule a meeting.
Okay, can we discuss time availabilities? Because for some of us, we took our time off of work to be here, so.
Deeply appreciate that. What are days of the week? Tuesdays are good days to avoid because those are council meetings often.
Yeah.
And if there's a day of the week that's better than others, we're happy to note that for the record. And then daytime versus evening is another option.
I'd prefer Monday personally, but
Friday's a heavy work day for me. And evenings or the late afternoon has always worked better.
Yeah, usually for me, Mondays and Wednesdays are always good because of meetings on Tuesday evenings, because sometimes we have school board meetings. And then once a month usually when I have certain district meetings that are Tuesday afternoons and then other district ones Thursday after evenings. So, but time wise, if they give me my same schedule, fingers crossed, for me, anytime after 2 o'clock is good.
fine with me.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much free whenever. I just take time off of work and don't care about it. So I'm not there. It's not my problem.
Okay, so we heard Mondays, anytime after 2.
Mhm.
And I think we could probably do something a little later than 2, just to kind of make sure that people can get here.
Yeah.
So maybe a 3 o'clock start or something like that, or 4.
Okay.
Good, we'll note that for future meetings.
Okay. All right, so I just move on to item 11, the words everyone wants to hear. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned to the next meeting. Thank you for joining us today.